I have some lifters where their technique's great. It's like, why am I getting stronger? It's like, you're a beginner. You just have to get more muscular, and that's going to take time. To hit your peak, you're going to have to become a different lifter.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Okay, Matt. This morning, I was looking through your open powerlifting in a little bit more detail than I typically do. So I wanted to jump off with this because you have 12 years as a competitive lifter as coach as well, right? Mm-hmm. So usually when I go through open powerlifting, I'm looking at what the best lifts were, dots and all that. And
right.
You compete at the highest level. So they're where there should be, the dots is what your best dots is 550, 0.85. The weight class thing, right? Yeah. This is the interesting part as I was going through here. And I thought it was wrong, right? Because when you started, you were 242. Then you moved into the 275. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Then it's kind of like sticking around the 275 with the 250 weight class. Then I'm looking at this last meet and it's like 198. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? We could inverse all these meets and it would make sense to me.
Yeah.
So if we dial this back into the first, how were you introduced? You were 20 in the first meet. So were you training for football or something like that? How did you get introduced into the training just to start with?
Yeah, sure. So when I first started training, it was in college, my freshman year of college. I wasn't playing a sport or anything like that. Admittedly, it was like a lot of young men. I was trying to get girls, and I figured, well, I got to get jacked. Women love a muscular guy. So
did it work?
No. I got a lot of male attention. Whether that's a good or bad, I suppose it depends on the person. But no, I started off with just bodybuilding training at my college. Didn't really have a plan or anything like that going into the weight room on those days. It was mostly like, oh, today's going to be chest day, so I'm going to pick these exercises and just kind of get a pump. And a lot of it kind of followed I say it wasn't a plan, but it was more of like the Arnold Schwarzenegger philosophy. I still have his encyclopedia of bodybuilding book, a lot of high volume stuff. And so that's kind of how I started. And then I realized, after like 3 or 4 months, I'm like, I'm getting more muscular, but I'm not that big. And at the time, I didn't conceptualize that this is a long-term game, even if you're a bodybuilder. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I'm like, well, what am I missing here? And I'd go look at other bodybuilders, and they're like, oh, they're all really strong. Okay, I guess I have to get strong, and then I'll get big, or I have to get these lifts up. So at the time, I really wasn't squatting very frequently. I actually have a funny story. My first time squatting, I just like loaded up 185 on the bar. I had one of the gym attendants spot me, and it was, of course, like sky high. I think I got it for 10 reps, and I went home later that day, and I had like tweaked the crap out of my back. My parents are like, you're big enough. You're good. You don't have to push this any farther. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, I got to get bigger. I got to get more muscular. Anyway, so I was like, okay, I need to get stronger. How do I do that? So I go on the internet. I start looking up stuff. I found you guys. I also found Mark Ripetoe's Starting Strength, and it seemed like a pretty easy program to follow. You're just doing like 3 sets of 5 on squat, bench, and deadlift. That's kind of it. And me at the time, I didn't really know much better. I still think it's a decent program for most beginners if they're like just trying to get into weight training. I was like, I'm going to follow that. And I think as I get stronger, I should be getting bigger because that makes more sense. And that's kind of what kickstarted my journey, was getting into the weight room for, vanity purposes, and then pivoting towards, squat, bench, and deadlift for like the same reason, kind of trying to get bigger, stronger muscles. But then I started to fall in love with the weight room because I realized that as I was getting stronger, I was building a lot of confidence in myself. I felt like I was, what's the word I'm looking for? I wasn't buying my confidence, right? It didn't feel fake. Every PR that I hit, every pound that I put on my squat, bench, and deadlift was like, I earned that. And there were times when I would like stall out and I'd have to restart over, take 20, 30 pounds off the bar. But it was like, I kept that confidence. I learned I had that, I guess the like correct term would be like that self-efficacy. And that's really what kind of started me down this path. Like, it wasn't necessarily for sports or anything like that. It was mostly in some ways a vain pursuit at first. And then it kind of turned into like self-improvement. And it's kind of where I've followed that thread too.
For contextual purposes, and we'll circle back to it here, but it was another thing that stuck out as I went through your powerlifting history of the numbers is you're speaking about the squat. The squat's an interesting one here to kind of watch, right? Because it has its ups and downs, right? But your squat at 198 coefficiently is better than what it was when you were in the 275s, but it's not that really that far. It's like one really good day off of being better than what it was at 275, which typically you don't see that.
Yeah.
Right. You'll see you gain weight, squat goes up, you lose weight, squat tanks, right?
Yeah.
Everything you have in here is the inverse of what's typical. Yeah. It really is. You know what I'm saying? Like, you lose weight, deadlifts is supposed to go up. You gain weight, your deadlift going up, right? So it's, the programming is going to be interesting to discuss how it's evolved throughout this whole period of time, because you can kind of see at standard programming, ooh, shit, something's going a little weird here, playing around, trying to figure things out, figured it out for where you are now, right? Yeah. And it will break, and it's how it works, right?
Exactly.
It's not going to work forever, but then it's going to like fall apart as it kind of goes all through there. With the confidence aspect, to kind of dial back on that, was that lacking, before the training?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Growing up, so I'm I don't have any brothers and sisters. I have a half brother, half sister, but they weren't around. I felt like I always kind of lacked confidence, and there was never anything I could like point to, like no crazy situation that would lead me to like be incredibly, have low self-esteem. But, I always felt like, I just wasn't a confident kid. Kind of quiet and shy through a good amount of high school and stuff like that.
So who were you in high school? You know how people fall into cliques?
Yeah, I was admittedly the part of like the druggy clique, unfortunately. Maybe that'd probably be the best way to put it. So yeah, I mean, around then was probably when I was at my like lowest self-esteem. I wish I had powerlifting back then. I really wish I did, or at least
Was there any other sports?
So I did play football before I went into high school. It was like pee-wee football. That was probably my first taste of like understanding like, oh, like doing things with physicality with my body, like makes me feel good. It makes me feel capable, but I didn't really understand it at the time. Like, I was more focused on, oh, this is, so tough. We have to run like, sprints after practice, and like, oh, my body hurts. And like, I was focused more on like the cost going into developing those qualities more than the actual like benefit. And it's not until now that I realized like what I potentially could have gotten out of it if I had, the right mindset. But you're a kid, you don't really necessarily.
What about when you were younger, through your developmental ages?
Yeah, so I did other sports, but I was never like a baseball kid. I was never a track kid. Like, my parents put me through all these sports. So like basketball, baseball, football, obviously, even like swimming. They wanted me to do diving. I think they even wanted me to do like ballet at one point, or like dance or whatever. But they're always trying to get me in certain sports. I think mostly just to like spend time with other kids, because like I said, I was an only child. I had friends growing up, but I wasn't necessarily as outgoing as other people. I've always been kind of like introverted, maybe kept to myself. And so I did do a lot of sports, but I was never like I said, I was never like a baseball kid. I did quite a bit of sports. So I had a wide range of, I guess, developmental skills that I had growing up. And then I started to kind of like focus that more into football, because my parents wanted me to go to a specific high school to play, because they had like a really good program, and the high school was, very well reputable in our area.
So when you're in grade school,
yeah,
the whatever class was before lunch, right?
Yeah.
Where are you sitting in the classroom? Front of the room, middle of the room, back of the room?
Probably towards the back of the room. Yeah, I was probably towards the back. I was probably not paying attention. I was probably trying to talk to other kids, maybe distract them, or I was just like zoned out in my own world. Actually, funny story, kind of related in terms of like zoning out. I would be the kid playing sports where I have distinct memory of me playing baseball and I was an outfielder, and I would literally just be sitting on the ground like picking daisies, like literally just, you know, playing in the grass, like not really paying attention. You know, no one's really hitting massive homers at that age. So like the ball rarely, if ever, came to me. So I would just sit down and play with the grass, you know, just kind of be in my old world, like imagining things, you know, stuff like that. So, but yeah, I was in the back of the class. Was probably not the best student at the time.
Now, when they have you line up for lunch,
Yep.
Right? Are you first in line, middle in line, or are you waiting for everybody else to go?
I'm probably in the middle of the line towards the back. Probably just like putzing around.
So like blending in.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd say so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, when it comes to strength athletes, I like to kind of like dig back in to be able to see where some of the mental fortitude comes in, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's a big, arguably, I would say it's the biggest piece, mm-hmm. you know, once it's all kind of put together, yeah. But also where the physical attributes were developed, especially for strength. Now, when we're talking about different athletes that need more coordinational skills and stuff like that, and that's really interesting to dig into, because a lot of the qualities that they develop very young.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, as far as like endurance and visual acuity and all these other things, which are all fascinating. A lot of the times with the strength athletes, you see, and we didn't have all that. It was just kind of like this one thing.
Yeah.
And then this attitude that slowly develops, that's kind of like either a fuck authority type thing, or I'm just going to kind of like blend in. Yeah. So nobody knows what's going on. Then when they're recognized, it's like, yes, you know, it's weird. And then the training can kind of find its way in.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able to make you feel like you're more in front of the line. Mm-hmm. Then there's the other fuck ups that are like me, that when they would say line up, I'm like, don't fucking tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. Like I will sit here. Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a whole different type of thing, but it's weird to see how as the sport's grown, like the frontliners are moving into the sport, which is interesting because it used to be like middle liners and back. This is a really way to like psychoanalyze somebody, like where they line up for lunch when they're in grade school.
I mean, funny enough, I do have my bachelor's degree in psychology, so we could really kind of go off on a tangent.
Oh, that's cool.
But I think that in terms of powerlifting, I think that's really interesting, because as far as my knowledge goes, and maybe someone can correct me and maybe you would know, I believe powerlifting started off as the odd lifts, in terms of people wanted to go into to weightlifting, and the people that weren't good enough for weightlifting ended up going towards powerlifting, the odd lifts at the time. So in some ways, you could consider it, if this is in fact the case, that powerlifting from the beginning has been like a counterculture sport. And so people that are probably drawn to counterculture are the people that have been like disenfranchised, people that may not have been the frontliners, as you're saying, right? And so it's really interesting now that, like you said, now we have more of the frontliners, more of the in crowd, whatever you want to call it, trickling into powerlifting. You see that shift in terms of like the population, right? Like you have more federations like USAPL or Powerlifting America, you know, these, I guess you could call them mainstream federations, are getting bigger, more popular, and not to pick on them, but like the multiply federations have always been slowly dying out, so to speak. But I think they really accurately represent like the counterculture that's all that's left in powerlifting, because I mean, let's face it, Raw is arguably a lot bigger than multiply as of right now. It gets a lot more.
It's provenly bigger.
Exactly. I'm trying to be just nice about it, but because I do have some multiply buddies. You know, I did train at a multiply gym for a while.
I wouldn't be. I would expose them to the reality of the whole thing. It's like, this is a crazy topic to me, because it's not like we don't have this giant database called Open Powerlifting where you can just go look.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at the number of people that don't
go look.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, man, multiply is just blowing up. I'm like, are you sure? Right. Now it does get dicey when you look at unlimited, because it counts the high school powerlifting
Oh
because
yeah,
of
like
the band
the
shirt.
Texas High School Powerlifting Association.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it gets kind of weird there too. Yeah, no, for sure. I I don't know many people that argue that multiply is like on the rise. I think it's always had a stable foothold since it started to kind of die off in the early 2000s. I feel like it's kind of stayed the same size, but it looks like it's probably dying off harder than it is because Raw is just growing at like an exponential rate. I mean, we're kind of down right now compared to like pre-COVID, maybe, if I had to guess, if I had to go like look and really pour at the data. But it's still growing like massively. And when you compare those, if something's kind of stagnant, it may look like it's dying, right? But anyway, to just kind of like wrap it all back up, I think, powerlifting always kind of started as this counterculture sport. And so it's really interesting now to see these people that are like you said, frontliners that are more popular, mainstream, so on and so forth, that are now kind of coming into the sport. And you see this, like the shift going away from catering to the counterculture or the like disenfranchised group, more towards popularization and all that comes with it, the good and the bad. So
well, it's interesting because the first article I ever wrote for Powerlifting USA, I can't remember the name of it now, but the premise of the whole, or the closing of the article was, this is back like late 90s, is that powerlifters, the counterculture that you're talking about, basically are athletes that weren't good enough to actually move past high school, or the ones that have already passed their prime and retired.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. Or you have people that have like the late bloomers, like maybe for me, so to speak, not to like throw my name in there, but I see that with a lot of people that maybe they just, for whatever reason, weren't athletically inclined in high school, and they feel the need like now, like, okay, I have to start taking care of myself. Like, okay, I need to start going to the gym. Well, how do I stay consistent? Well, there's this thing called powerlifting where you can compete in meets and, like I can kind of do these at my leisure. And, I'm the only one that's accountable. So it's like, oh, so no one's forcing me to do this. Like it's kind of all up to me, which has its pros and cons. And so with that, you have this like third group of people that are maybe not the athletes when they first started, but it kind of gives them some sort of outlet, or it helps them inject some excitement into their life, because I mean, let's face it, as you get older, you don't necessarily have as many like defining moments, or, you don't have those adrenaline rushes as you're a kid, right? Like if you've never played sport or hit a home run, powerlifting kind of allows that for every time you step on the platform. So it's a way for some people to just like get that, adrenaline pumping experience, every time they compete, or sometimes every time they go into the gym.
The heat is here, and I'm already hearing stories about people cramping and how it's screwing up their training sessions. The research shows optimal health outcomes at sodium levels 2 to 3 times the recommended level. As meatheads, we've known this for years. Element was built around this. For the past 2 years, I've used Element in my morning oatmeal. I put it in my coffee. I use it during training. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugar, no fillers. It's just what your body needs. Stable energy with no crash, maintaining optimal fluid levels for peak performance in the gym, improves mental focus, helps regulate stress, and supports deeper sleep. Element just outdid themselves with this lemonade iced tea flavor. Same formula, but they added 50 milligrams of caffeine with L-theanine and polyphenols. Unlike isolated caffeine, this slows the curve. We all know that caffeine can dehydrate you. Well, not when it's mixed with Element. Go to drinkelements.com. You get a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard of anyone having a bad experience, but if you do, they make it right immediately, no questions asked. Well, it's interesting because it's no longer what I described back then.
Yeah.
Right. So it maybe there's a lot of factors. CrossFit introduced people to barbells.
Yeah.
Social media introduced people to barbells, where back then it's funny, right? Because you were a power lifter only if you competed. Right. Even if you were a bench specialist, that didn't count. You're not a power lifter because you just bench.
Yep.
Right. So that was kind of the argument back then. While back then, bodybuilding, training like a bodybuilder, we call it closet bodybuilders, but not competing, was a big thing. that was probably way bigger than the actual competitive bodybuilding. You would see it in every gym you go to. You were training that way. Like everybody's like training like a bodybuilder. You're going through muscle and fitness, flex, whatever it's going to be. And because of that growth, which is what every powerlifter always wanted, you know, they all wanted it to grow. Because of that growth, now we have what I guess you could say is closet powerlifters.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people that train like powerlifters, but really don't have any aspirations to compete. Even those that have competed and have retired from the sport, they either, you know, just retire to the couch and drink beers and become a slob, or they still train like that powerlifter. They just take a lot of the risk, you know, out, you know, that was associated with it before. So, and because of that growth, the net's way bigger.
Yeah.
So when you're throwing the net out, you're going to catch more of the genetic outliers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say they're outliers, right? You just catch the people that are more genetically suited. And then all these misfits that probably weren't genetically suited because they weren't good enough to even play a high school sport. Or they're beyond because they're so fucked up. Like they played Division I football, they can barely walk, so now they powerlift and they're breaking all-time world records. Where 40 years ago, it was kind of real easy. You would go through and there would be like 1 or 2 people per weight class that are just like an Ed. I don't want to say like an Ed Cohn, but like a smaller, like a less strong, less dominating version of an Ed Cohn.
Head and shoulders above everyone else in the weight.
Yes. It's just like, here's this person. And then everybody else is like trying to just get in the top 10.
Yeah.
But there was now like every class is
like that.
Full.
Yeah.
You know, of those type of things, because it's a bigger net. It's pulling in those other people. And I think that's partially why the numbers have gone up so much.
I would say so.
It's not, because I've heard every reason in the world, well, because they see these numbers being broken, it makes it easier, like the 4-minute mile. Yeah, I get that. But that's been going on forever. You know, it's
going to continue to go on.
Maybe the people are just coming in with better genetic abilities to be able to adapt to the sport. You know, and when you catch those, we see them. Like there's every year, I don't want to say every year, but every couple of years, at least every 3 years for sure. I don't want to throw names out. Well, Colton would be one of the most, every 3 years, like somebody comes out of nowhere. You're like, the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? You know, and eventually, you know, he'll keep getting stronger, but I don't want to wish ill will on anybody. Everybody's got a career, you know, path up and a down. There's going to be another one.
Always.
Like in a few years, because there's always been another one. And then the other interesting ones that kind of pop up are the ones that they're just kind of like floating in the middle. They're just there. Then all of a sudden, they're like really there, which is like, that's another part. You kind of fit in this, by the way. That's another part that I'm kind of fascinated about, because a lot of people are going to say PEDs. Right. And in most of the cases that we'll look at stuff like that, we can say, yeah, okay, but they were being used by this guy 6 years before this happened. So what? It just got better. You know, they took more, you know, like that's not, we have to exclude that variable. Like what changed? Right. And that's fascinating because a lot of the times, and I'd be interested to see what your opinion of this, a lot of the times what I see as one of the constants, there's a lot of them, is who they compete against changed. They went from competing in the most convenient meet, which we all understand that it costs money to compete. Stuff, you know, they start going to bigger meets and all of a sudden they're competing against somebody that maybe they're smaller than you. They're in the same weight class. You're looking at them in the weight room and you're thinking to yourself, like, what the fuck? Like, why is this dude squatting 50 pounds more than me? Or benching 100 pounds? Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? You know, that's a big variable. The other one is, I think they start to understand the nuance in powerlifting because they get a little older. The way in your growth is kind of showing this is you can get in the sport, you have this first peak growth phase, right? And then that kind of like dies out, right? And then there will be a second one, right? A lot of the times the second ones could be PEDs, it could be a lot of different, it doesn't really matter what that second one is, right? But then there's a third one, right? And the third one, will be a big part of what we're going to talk about. The third one is super interesting because it's not what people think.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you've exhausted every resource because you've been all in on the things that you want to be all in on.
Yep.
You know, training, you know, supplementation, all this other kinds. You're all in on all that.
Yep.
And then you realize sleep matters. Like if I change my nutrition, like all the stuff you can get away with in your younger 20s.
Can't get away with that anymore. Yeah.
You can't get away with it.
No.
Normally the reason why you realize you can't get away with it is because you're not recovering, you're getting hurt.
Yep.
Then you dial that in, then all of a sudden here's this other peak that you didn't know you had, which makes me wonder, what if that was 5 years sooner?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know the answer because nobody goes through that process.
No.
So you try to coach them. Those are some of the clients that you have.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's probably one of your most frustrating experiences.
Can be, yeah.
Have you seen that your careers kind of followed that?
Yeah, I would say so. I wish I could say I was the most like locked in person to all my recovery variables when I first started, but looking back compared to now, I wasn't. But at the time, I was as all in as I could conceive. And so for me,
So were you competing in college?
yeah, I was. So that's what some of those meets you're speaking about. Those were, during my college years.
Did you care more about powerlifting or school?
Powerlifting.
Admittedly. Okay.
I was, I've been an avid, fan of Elite FTS for a long time. So I identify a lot with like your story as much as I understand, where you're kind of like making your life revolve more so around powerlifting than making powerlifting fit into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that a lot with my college classes, right? I would pick certain ones where I knew I would be able to train at certain times, I would be able to eat at certain times. I would get a good amount of sleep, so on and so forth. So during college, a lot of that was kind of structured around like, how can I make myself the best powerlifter I can be? And so back then I was, whether I knew it or not, in terms of like consciously, I was kind of making myself all in or as best I could at the time.
So how does this is interesting because a lot of the lifters that will go through that are usually in exercise science and stuff like that. You're in psychology, right?
Yeah.
Because when I went through college, I don't want to get into the long story. I've already said it a million times. I got to a point where I was just picking courses I was interested in just to accumulate credit so I could graduate, right? And most of them ended up being sociology and psychology courses because how can you not take a class called deviant sexual behavior, right? How can you not, and
of course.
And now that I look back on all that, because there was the big sociology side of that, which is basically your environment, how it impacts you. Mm-hmm. And then the psychology aspect where I'm learning, Freud and Jung and, all this other shit, but I didn't give a fuck, I don't care. Yeah. I'm just like trying to like pass the test. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to think back because I was into like visualization and shit like that. So, but I wasn't like trying to like cherry pick from my courses to try to figure out how to be a better lifter.
Yeah.
Were you?
In the beginning I was. So I actually started out as a exercise science major, and I had this idea that, I really like powerlifting. So I'm going to, and you would probably laugh at this, I'm like, I'm going to open a gym so I can lift whenever I want, because it's going to be so stress-free. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of glad that didn't work out, because every gym owner I know, every podcast I consume where they have, gym owners on, and I'm sure you can attest, it is anything but that. It is a very high stress environment. And so anyway, it was getting to the point where I was failing one class, and I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but it was like anatomy and physiology. We had, it was like a 2-part course. The first part was very easy. It was, the integumentary system, if I'm saying that right. Like, so your skin, you had like bone, muscle, very basic stuff. And that was super easy. Where I kind of struggled was like the neurology or neurological part. There was the like urological part. There was like, it was split into 2. And the second part was always the most difficult. And I remember the final straw for me was I was on my 3rd time taking that course. I needed an 80 to pass, or to get a C, because you had to get a C in order to move on to the further higher level courses. I got a 79.997 on my the last test, or that was maybe my average. And so I went to the teacher. I'm like, look, is there any way I could do some sort of extra credit? Like, could I just help in the lab? Like, just please, like, tell me, like, this is my third time, I can't keep racking up financially. Like, please just give me something. She's like, unfortunately, I can't. And, at the time it really bothered me. But at the time, or like now, I respect it because she stuck to her guns and she had her own, values and morals that she stuck by. She could have just let me slip by. But I went to my advisor. I'm like, what do I do? Like, I've already been here way too long. I think, I graduated in 2018, but I started going to college in 2012. So like, 6 years for a bachelor. It's not as long as some people I know, but I'm racking up financial aid. I'm like, what do I do? What do I need to do to graduate? He's like, well, actually, like if you look, you have a lot of psychology credits. And that was actually originally what I wanted to go to college for, was to potentially become a psychologist or do something in that field. So in the end, it turned out being just my easy way to graduate, just kind of get out of there. If I wanted to go back, I could. In some ways I do regret not going back and like turn that into something, but yeah, that's kind of how it ended up, was this kind of like winding path of like, I'm going to be a psychologist. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to open a gym. And I was actually going through my exercise science classes. I'm like, this may not be the right road. And like, I started to like disagree with some of the things that they taught, because it didn't seem like it was congruent with what I knew to be correct at the time in terms of like nutrition, training, stuff like that. And I'm like, well, screw that, but I'm still going to keep going, I guess, whatever. Like, I'll just, agree with what they say and I'll pass the test and I'll figure it out later. And then
I think I took 7 years to get the bachelor's, but I flunked out once.
Yeah.
And then, and it wasn't as expensive as when you were going either. So and I would never take more than 2 classes per semester. Summer classes were fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's every day. And as long as you go, you kind of retain it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was one class away from a sociology degree, and it was a foreign language. Okay. And so the issue I ran into that was you got to speak it, spell it, and conjugate it. It's like 3 classes. Yeah. And I tried a couple times. Kind of the same boat that you were in. It's like I could have just, transferred or taken the class someplace else and be able to done it. But at that point, it was kind of, I already had over the number of credits you needed to graduate, just because I didn't want to retake the classes I failed, because then you're kicked out for good. Yeah. And decided to transfer and then do what I wanted, which was be a strength coach. And so then it was, I'm laughing, I'm bringing it up because the anatomy and physiology was kind of like the foreign language. It's like, I can orally answer this question for you, but now I got to spell this shit. Yeah. There's a problem, man. Like, I got the answer right, but you're marking it wrong because I misspelled, this muscle group that doesn't even write out. It doesn't even sound like,
it's not the same.
No. But I figured it all out. But in hindsight, looking back, the carryover that I've had through life has probably come more from the psychology, the sociology, because usually tied up into those is public speaking, communications, and all these other things.
Yeah, and understanding people, right?
Yes, which that wasn't really taught when I got into the exercise science, nutrition domain, which is weird because, like, if you want to be a coach, a strength coach or a personal trainer, it's kind of like the most important factor.
Yeah, your soft skills. Yeah.
But it's your elective. I'm like, ooh, I don't. It's weird,
it is
right?
A weird spot,
right?
Yeah, you'd figure, but yeah, it's interesting, like how school outfits you for certain things, but then you look back, you're like, well, this would have been nice to have when I was going through school. Like, I mean, the classic argument's always like how to do taxes and stuff like that. Like, it would be nice to have like a tax class when you're in like the early levels of like anyone's college, acumen or academic career. But, as far as I know, at least when I was going there, like, it's really not taught. It's just things that you learn or like things along that line. Yeah, you'd figure it'd be like kind of built in because it is very important, especially as like a strength coach. Like you said, you have to be able to, motivate people. You have to be able to speak to them. You have to be able to make your points understood, connect with them on, like a basic level, build rapport. But, a lot of it's just kind of like the nuts and bolts of, what's needed to be successful as a strength coach. So it's kind of interesting how that plays out.
What's interesting because the powerlifting is the number one priority at this time. Yeah. Right. So, yeah. And so I get it more than probably anybody else does, how that all works in, because the classes are just like background noise. Do what you got to do, get the damn grades just so you can just train for the next meet.
Yeah.
And all the things that are important for you to actually succeed later in the sport really don't matter because you're young.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that, when you were at that time, how were you training, and then how were you eating? Right. Because I can probably guess, how the eating is, but so actually, that's the first thing. That were you the typical college person just getting hammered in the bars on the weekends?
No, I was not actually. Can go on a tangent with this if you wanted, but no, I was definitely not that person. In high school, I had a really hard time, like I talked about earlier, like fitting in. There was a lot of like drug use for me in high school. I kind of consider myself a recovering drug addict. It got pretty bad at points, which we could talk about.
Hard or soft?
What would be the difference?
Like marijuana?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was an equal opportunity employer. So I took whatever I could get my hands on. I was never like, this is my vice of choice. It was whatever kind of helped me dissociate from the uncomfortable feelings of being anxious, depressed.
So what was the drug of choice?
There wasn't. Sorry. So I had none. So it was literally, I mean, if I had to pick, marijuana, weed, that was easily accessible. But yeah, I mean, there was times, I'd be going to school and I would have like a thermos full of like alcohol and I would just chug that before my first class. Or, I mean, on the more extreme end, I remember, I won't obviously name names, but like going into school, I was told that like my friend could get us heroin before going into class. I'm like, great, let's do that. And so going to his car, we snorted at the time. I remember this is how I knew it. Like looking back, you never know how like deep in the throes of addiction or like how messed up things are until you're in hindsight. But I remember being upset that we couldn't inject it because we snorted it in his car. But I remember that was like probably one of the like lowest points. I didn't realize at the time, but
well, how are you paying for this? Because is it like lunch money that's being reallocated?
Basically, yeah. So I mean, like the alcohol, I would just steal from my parents' liquor cabinet. Sorry, mom and dad, this might be a little bit of news to you or not, but yeah, paying it for like that, or just like paying for it through like the lunch money that we're given. Or I'll ask my parents, hey, can I have $20-$30? I'm gonna go to I don't know, do this on Friday, and then like whatever money I would have left over, I would either save or spend that towards, drugs or whatever I could find. Or I would, because I got kicked out of my first high school, I was selling drugs. So whatever money I had left over as profit, I would take that and, use myself. So anyway, to go back.
So what was that like getting kicked out for that reason? Because now you got to go to another school and you're known as the person.
Yeah, it was, it's not funny, but at the time, I knew the magnitude of the situation. It was bad, but I didn't feel that terrible. Whereas I think other kids may have been like, their world's falling around them. But I think at the time, I felt so disconnected from what was normal because at the time, like I said, I had like really low self-esteem, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and I had like family issues kind of going on at the same time. It was kind of like, I don't care. Right. Like I felt like alone. So in some ways it was like, oh, this is not good, but like, who cares? So yeah, it was tough though, to go into a new school and try to make new friends. That probably magnified a lot of my issues at the time because I got kicked out halfway through my sophomore year or so. And so I literally had to transfer mid-year to this new school, and everyone's like, who's this new kid? Why is he here? And I'm sure they either found out through me telling them or through rumors why I got kicked out. And so, some people were friendly to me, others were understandably a little bit more cautious. And so it was tough looking back. Like I didn't really understand maybe how tough it was, and I had a weird outlook at the time, but yeah, it was rough. I didn't really know how to make friends with people. Like all my coping skills came from using drugs. And like I said at the time, like I played football like my freshman year of high school, but I wasn't a football guy. I wasn't in the weight room,
When you say it was rough, right? So it's,
yeah,
You said something that kind of resonated where, so say half of the people, um, are looking at you like kind of in a way like, don't fuck with this dude.
Yeah.
Like he just got kicked out of this other, and that can give you power, right? Because you're walking through and it's like, you know what, half of these people, fuck them. They're not going to fuck with me because they think I'm out of my mind and I'll fuck them all up, right? That gives you a certain degree, right, of power, fucked up or not fucked up. It's there, which is kind of rewarding, right? Because in a way you have power over half these other people.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, the training actually kind of did that when I was in high school.
Okay.
Right. Because I was stronger than everybody else. I went from the person everybody fucked with to the person nobody wanted to fuck with. Right. So in a way, to some of those people, you're the person nobody wants to fuck with. Now it can get dicey when it's the people that you actually want to be friends with.
That's what I was going to chime in with was, at the time, like I assumed every high school is like every other high school. Cause I first went to a Catholic high school. And I went to a public school when I got expelled. Not like it has any bearing, but I just assumed that like, oh, well, these kids are all going to be the same. And I figured I would just bond with them like I did with the kids at my Catholic high school. And so, I try to talk to them about like, hey, like you guys want to go like smoke some weed after school? And, some of them were like down for it, or some were like, yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks though. And a larger majority than I had anticipated were just like, no, like I'm good, man. Like, and I didn't have the communication skills at the time to understand, like, you can't just like walk up to people and like start talking to them like that. Like, at the time, I think my way of building rapport with people was so poor because whether it's the environment I came from or the skills that I chose to communicate with people through, it just didn't work. So a lot of these people, they wouldn't want to be friends with me. And at the time I was like, why? Like they don't want to smoke weed and listen to like music or like, do all this fun stuff that I thought was fun. And now, looking back and I realize it's like, well, yeah, and like, no shit. Like these people are not necessarily having the same goals as you. And like, you're just kind of coming up to them, trying to force what you want on them. And, that was kind of tough to deal with, like I said, and that's why it was rough. Cause I thought, well, this worked at my old school. It's going to work here. And it was weird when it did not. And that was probably not one of my first lessons of like growing into like adulthood, but it definitely was a learning lesson where it's like, oh, well, you can't just like assume everyone wants the same things as you. You have to learn how to like talk to people. You can't just like use these drugs, not only as a way to kind of escape from reality, but like use them as a tool to get what you want, which is like the, affection or attention you want from like friends potentially.
What was the reality you were trying to escape from?
Good question. I think it was that I was just deeply unhappy at the time. And I should say that I didn't have like a rough upbringing. There was no like acute event where it's like, that's the thing that like, why I'm using drugs. Right. I think I was just very unhappy. And like looking back, maybe it's because, and I don't want to like turn this into some sort of philosophical discussion, but I didn't really have like a thing, right? Like a lot of people have things when they're growing up or even into adulthood of like, now I could say, it's powerlifting, it's coaching. Other people have sports when they're growing up. Other people have hobbies, right? They have like, some people, it may be even like their church, so on and so forth. Like I had certain things I enjoyed doing, like playing video games, reading books, but I never felt like I had any sort of passion. So in some ways I felt like empty inside. And you could also throw in there, like, I had friends, but I wasn't spending a lot of time with them. Like my parents didn't want me to go out after school on school nights to go hang out with them. It was like only on the weekends and, so on and so forth. So in some ways I felt disconnected, empty inside, and kind of like, I had all these like emotions inside me as any kid, going through puberty does. And I didn't really know how to navigate them. So rather than trying to learn how to navigate them or cope with them and through something like powerlifting, which like I said would have been great when I was growing up, I was just like, well, let's just nullify all of it and just take drugs, because if I don't have to feel anything, I don't have to deal with it. Little did I know it's going to come back, and I'm going to have to deal with it later, perhaps tenfold. But that was probably why I was like using drugs in the first place, because I didn't know how to manage my own inner turmoil. And
so it wasn't there when you were competing in powerlifting. So
no.
What transcribed to make it not be there anymore?
Yeah, that's a good question. So through high school, when I transferred to the second school, I had this kind of like growth period where at some point I was like, look, I have a problem. I can't live like this anymore. Like, it's killing my parents and I feel terrible for what I put them through. I need some sort of outlet. Like, and so that's when I kind of started to come down the path of like, like exercise or whatever you want to call it, fitness. And so at the time I started to take up running, weirdly enough. And I stopped using drugs and I kind of replaced that with running. In some ways I replaced one addiction with another. Positive, hopefully, depending on who looks at it. And so I was taking up running. I was just running everywhere through that last couple of years. I remember I lost like 30 or 40 pounds. And I remember one day looking in the mirror and I felt like I was all skin and bones. I have like photos of myself before when like I was at my peak usage of like drugs, and then like my graduation photos or prom photos. You can't even tell the difference. You can tell a massive difference. It's like not even the same person. So going into college, in like my senior year of high school, summer, going into college, I remember I got shin splints, and I was like, oh, so I guess when I go online, they say you just have to take a break. Little did I know anything about like load management and like, you can you can still run, just don't like go balls to the wall every time. That'll probably become a recurring theme, in the podcast. But it's like, okay, so I guess I just can't run. Okay, well, like, what else do people do? And then I was like, all right, well, I guess my parents have these weights in the basement, like these 20-pound dumbbells. I'm just going to do those every day because this isn't going to hurt my shins. And so I started to lift weights like that, and I really enjoyed it. Even though it was very lightweight, it was basically do those until absolute failure if possible, like circuit training. And so that was kind of what kind of tilted my path towards, being more of an endurance runner or whatever you want to call it, towards lifting weights. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question. You have to really back in.
I've been training for over 4 decades now, and keeping track of all my training metrics has always been a big part of that. It wasn't until later on that I realized that keeping track of your internal metrics are just as important, if not more important, the longer you're in this game. Most primary care physicians, if you go in for any type of issue, they'll look for what's off, but they're not necessarily looking for how to optimize where your labs are for where you want to go. That's where Merrick Health comes in. Merrick Health does advanced blood work with medical providers around the world and a health coach who helps build a plan around your goals. I worked with Merrick to build a custom lab panel for this show. They have guided optimizations that can help you set you up with a health coach to be able to work through what your goals are, from the prescriptions to supplements, just the whole deal. Don't have to do that. You can just do the lab panels. They have options. You can find this at merrickhealth.com/table talk for 10% off your first order. One of the best decisions that I ever made was to partner with Merrick. So I highly suggest you head over to merrickhealth.com/table talk and get started today.
Because you're dealing with two different type of things here. You're dealing with the altered state that you're going to have from freaking heroin, and jogging. It's, you know what I'm saying? If you have a drug of choice, I'm like, jogging. Is that really?
Yeah, kind of a lame choice, I suppose, in comparison.
But it worked, though.
It did, yeah. I wish I could tell you why it worked, but, well, actually, I do have a good reason. So at the time, like, I was a little overweight, and I realized, like, when I was jogging, I was losing all this weight. I was getting more trim. I was actually getting more female attention. People were more willing to talk to me. I looked probably more approachable. I probably looked healthier too, right? Because like you're not, like this, like, I hate to say like fat mess, but like you have a confidence about you. And that's when I started to realize like, oh, like when I do these things and I do these like hard runs, like this builds character, and it makes me feel good. And that must be like exuding through, my exterior somehow. Cause like all these people want to talk to me, and, I probably, like I said, look more approachable because I have like, I don't look like, what's that guy, like John Belushi. So, so that is how I probably stuck with, exercise and lifting more, is because I was getting the external reward before I was getting the intrinsic internal reward. in the beginning, at least. I think the intrinsic stuff about, developing as a person, becoming, achieving mastery, all that stuff, I think that happens later. I think the external intrinsic rewards is really what kind of kept me going at first. And I think that's probably what keeps most people going at first with exercise. And then that intrinsic part kind of comes a little bit later, at least for me.
So how did the competitive powerlifting come into the picture when you were in college?
Yeah. So I realized after a while I was getting strong, or at least people told me I was strong. And they're like, "Oh, have you ever heard of powerlifting?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know what it is. It seems kind of cool. Maybe I'll do a meet one day." And then they're like, "Okay." And then over time, people are like, "No, you should really do a meet." And I remember there's this guy at my local Experience Fitness. I don't know if Experience Fitness is a thing, but he was like, his name was Rich. He was this older guy. He's like, "Hey, I'm doing this meet, this USAPL meet in January." And at the time, I think it was like, I don't know what time of year it was. Like, "Hey, you should do it." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure. Like, I'll look into it." And this was a long time before. I think this maybe was summer. And I was like, "Well, maybe I should do something before." Like, okay. So I found this push-pull meet locally by me, locally being like 3 hours away in Stevens Point. And so me and my buddy drove up to this meet. It's not on open powerlifting, it's an unsanctioned meet. But I remember I benched at like 193, I benched 215. Not the best bench at the time, but I deadlifted 500. And it was interesting because that was probably like my first exposure to competing. And also interesting, I was actually where I met Travis McKinney, who was a guest on here, is a very great multiply lifter. He was actually the head judge at this meet at Stevens Point. I remember there was a guy at the meet who was in multiply, and he was in like one of the metal jack suits, the big orange suit, and he was like deadlifting. I'm like, "Oh, like that's really interesting, like seeing him deadlift." But that's kind of how the powerlifting started, was through that push-pull meet, which was in November. And I remember being like, "Okay, like this is cool. Like I really liked how this made me feel." And like, I'm, when's the next one? And that was around the time when I was still training at Experience. And so, during college. And so this rich guy was like, "Hey, there's this meet, January of, 2014, whatever it is." He's like, "Hey, you should do this meet. I'm doing it." I'm like, "Okay." And it was local to me. It was like 10 minutes from my mom's house. Actually at my old high school, the one I transferred to, weirdly enough, how that works. And so I remember 193 in like November. January, I think it's on there, I think I weighed 230. So I was like, "I'm going to get as big and strong as I can, and I'm just going to compete at this meet and see what happens." I remember I was running 531 at the time. I had switched from I don't remember what I was doing at that push-pull meet, but I started to run 531 around that time. And that was my first exposure to a meet. And while it was at the time like pretty stressful, like I didn't really know what to expect. You read all these articles, you read people talking about what to do. It's still kind of like a stressful experience. I didn't have a handler or anything like that, but at that meet, I really enjoyed it. I had a ton of fun. Actually, weirdly enough, if you look at the videos, I think one on my Instagram or somewhere, it may be on YouTube, you can actually see like John Hack in the background talking to like some other lifters. So it's kind of weird how like all these people are poised around you, like whether you know it or not at the time. But that was like my first true meet, one of my first experiences with powerlifting, and it was great. It was like one of those moments where I had a couple of them leading up to it, but it kind of cemented for me. I was like, "Oh, like I'm going to do this for a long time. Like this makes me feel really good in so many ways I couldn't describe at the time."
So going into that meet, I mean, 531 kind of lays out a peak and all this other stuff.
Yep.
What were your expectations of the meet, and did you meet those? Because you think of the people that you help now that do their first meet, right?
Yeah.
They open too heavy. They all the. Did you avoid all those mistakes, or did you make all of them?
I'd like to think I avoided most. I mean, I got to give credit to like you guys were putting out great articles. So I knew some things to avoid. Like obviously you don't want to open too heavy, maybe a suggestion would be like open with your best triple or whatever like that. Like you want your opener to be very easy. Make sure you're following the commands. This is kind of how the like layout of the meet's going to work. You're going to squat, you're going to go through your attempts, and there'll probably be a break and then bench and so on and so forth. You want to pace yourself like accordingly. So I think the only mistake I made was on my bench. I knew my second attempt was probably too heavy, but I just kind of got like number obsessed. And I was like, I got to hit this third bench, whatever it was at the time. And I'm like, this is too heavy. I'm just going to go for it. And I missed. But I still probably did better than I expected because I didn't really have huge expectations of like, I'm going to open here. And I guess, on a good day, maybe I'll end at X weight. And I think for the squat, I think I ended 15 pounds heavier than I had planned. So I think I was going to hit 485 or something like that. Bench, I was probably the only one I overshot. And then deadlift, I remember asking my mom because she was there to support me, which was, thank you, Mom. Love you. She was there like filming it on her camera. And I was like, what do you think I should do for my third? And I only had like a couple seconds to decide. And she's like I don't know. I'm like, I think 550 would be really cool. And I'm like, should I do it? And she's like, yeah, go for it. I'm like, okay. And so I put that in, and I remember at the time, I think I smoked it, but yeah, I think I performed better than I expected. And probably due to the fact that I just didn't really have like these concrete expectations of like, I have to hit these numbers, in order to be good or anything like that. I just had, I guess, objectives would probably be better, but it was like, oh, like if I hit whatever, I hit whatever. I know first meets aren't necessarily about like setting the world on fire. It's just like, these are my numbers, and now I'm a power lifter and I have something to build off of for next time.
So when you were training for this, did you have somebody helping you with squat depth and stuff like that? Or you just, you're doing all this digitally?
Yep.
Right? So it's all from reading online.
Yep. And then I would record my sessions with my mom's camera. I would set it up so I could like look at my depth, or I would like record my benching, and I would like watch, okay, like, am I pausing long enough? Okay, cool. Is my butt coming up? No, it doesn't look like it. Maybe next week I'll video my set from the side or a couple from the side so I can make sure that's happening. What about my deadlift? Like, are my lockouts good? Is the bar speed okay? Okay, cool. Like, stuff like that. So I'd record it, and it had like a little viewfinder or digital out, screen, so I could always like look it back right after the set, and I could like adjust as I went. So no, I didn't really have like a coach or any sort of like outside resource other than what I'd read. It was mostly just me kind of like, reading, and then like being in the gym, kind of like experimenting and like documenting for myself and trying to adjusting as I went.
What were some of the things that you learned training for that first one that you took into the second one?
Sure. So first would probably be, I didn't make the mistake, but I think I started off on the right path. I know Jim writes about like, starting light, like starting your training cycle light. Like, you don't necessarily have to start 5 feet from the finish line in order to hit the finish. Like, you can allow yourself to build up over time. It's not like if you start your training cycle heavy, you're going to end heavier than you had planned, right? Like, you have to give yourself time to build up through the training cycle, through the meet, so on and so forth. Some other things would probably be understanding, and this is probably where I learned it, like all the stuff outside of training feeding into the training, the meet, which would be like nutrition, sleep, training. They all have to harmonize together in order to get the best result. Now, could I have been more lax with my nutrition at the time? Like, of course, I think anyone could have, but to me, this is something I really wanted to do, and it was really important to me. So I think I did that right from the jump. I probably overdid it, clearly, because I gained that's like 30 pounds or something like that. So probably overdid it on that aspect, but I guess maybe better to overdo it.
So what'd that look like, right? Because
Yeah.
you're intentional about it. So obviously you're intentional about the calories.
Yeah.
Are you also intentional about your macros?
Yeah. So I was tracking everything in MyFitnessPal at the time. I mean, I think I still have some of that, as long as they save it on their cloud or whatever. I still can look back and see the foods I was eating. Now, were they as good as they are now? Like, no. Like,
no, but were you covering your bases?
Yes. Yeah, of course. I was always eating roughly 1 gram per pound body weight in protein. I was getting what I thought was like an adequate amount of fats through my food. Trying to eat like good, as weird as a word as that is, good sources of carbs, trying to eat as like clean as I knew at the time, and what me and my mom could afford, or I could afford. So yeah, I was tracking everything to the best of my ability, given my age and like, being a college student. Yeah.
So after this first meet, you said that it's solidified that this is what you wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah.
What changed after that? Because the key part of that statement that's intriguing to me is for a long time,
Mhm.
right? Because there is, I want to be really good at this. And then the people that would just go,
Yeah.
right? And then there is no for a long time.
Yeah.
But so when you say that, did you actually mean that?
Yeah. I think maybe that wasn't the right wording, but it was literally, I think, I want to take this as far as I can go with it. I think that was literally
Yeah, okay.
what in my head I was, and I didn't really have like a concept of what that was. I had like these, impulsive thoughts in my head, or like these like short-sighted thoughts of like, I'm going to beat Ed Cohn. Like I'm progressing so fast. I'm going to beat Ed Cohn's numbers. Right. Cause at the time he was like my superhero. He's still like my superhero, but, yeah. So for me, it was like, I'm just going to take this as far as I can go. And I had no frame of reference of like what that meant. I was looking at, lifters at that time for like inspiration. So, competing in like the early 2010s, I'm looking at like Dan Green. I'm looking at guys like Jesse Norris, all on the raw side, but I'm even looking at like Janae Kroc, right? Like, all these, big, strong people, and kind of think like, okay, so I guess that's kind of like where the ceiling's at. So I guess I'm just going to, push it as far as I can go. And if I end up there, then that's really cool.
Now for that second meet, you're still putting everything together yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So from there, I remember after the first meet, at some point I switched programs to doing like the Shiko method, because at the time I started learning a little bit more about programming. I'm like, okay, so like specificity, like kind of training how you compete is really important. And if you want to get better at something, well, I think the easiest way to do that is just do that thing more often, right? As much as you can handle. So I pivoted towards that. I found like some online template that I could use. So that's when I switched to that method of training. The nutrition stayed the same.
So how'd you go about it? Because that's a weird one.
It's a weird jump. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird jump, but it's also a jump to, it's like, if you can find the programs, it's like Shiko 329.
Yeah.
There's no like Shiko 1.
Yeah. Exactly.
like where's like the 1 through 100? They all start like way out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's funny story about that. I think they're all numbered because they're actually just, that's how they would delineate the programs for his athletes. So like they knew like I am Shiko 321.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, how I went about finding it, honestly, I was just on the internet and I'm like, I think as the zeitgeist of powerlifting shifts and things kind of come in vogue, out of vogue, Shiko at the time was just in vogue, and I think that people were like just pushing it out there, making videos about it on YouTube when YouTube was like a little bit more in its infancy. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just do this. This seems like a good program based upon what people are saying in terms of like training philosophy and training principles. So I'll just run with it. And that's kind of how I made the jump from that. And I think, there's probably some weird like culture things we could talk about there about how you're going from like maybe a lower volume approach with like 5-3-1, depending upon what template you use, to more of a higher volume, and then things kind of shift back towards, well, lower volume's actually better, and then higher volume's actually better. This is how the pendulum swings. But I think at the time it was just a popular program.
So when you locked into that, did you? Because you're watching all these other people online, right? So there's every time you watch somebody else, there's a new idea.
Yes.
That pops into your head. So are you implementing those new ideas, or saying, this is what I'm locked into from now until this meet, and nothing's going to disrupt that unless it's like an accessory or some meaningless?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I was at the time pretty locked into the program. Like the program was the program. And so for better or for worse, I would stick to the program almost no matter what. And that, to me, in the beginning, I think that led to a lot of success, but eventually led to some failure, as like that was right around the time I started to incur some of like my first injuries, because I didn't know how to auto regulate. I didn't know, like, hey, like, the program says do 5 triples at 75%. First, it's like 75% of what, like, we're basing this off of a 1 rep max when I'm peaked, when I'm at like, the height of like my adrenaline, right? Like all these factors are coming together to create the peak. And when I'm training in my like local gym, and it's a Tuesday and I'm tired from working at like Walmart when I'm in college, that's not realistic. But
no, it's the 95%.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, no, I was pretty much just like, the program is the program. Like I do what is written, and for better or for worse, and the results are going to be the result. And if there's an issue, I'll evaluate at the end. And I think there's, some pros and cons with that. But that's how I did it. I think that's just like my personality. I'm very much a routine person. I'm very much like I'm not a go with the flow type person.
So how did that next meet go with that being the root of the program?
I think it went pretty well. I honestly don't remember it too much. You could probably tell me if you have the open powerlifting in front of me, but I mean, I never had like a meet where I was like, this is a disaster. That probably wasn't until later in my career where I've had meets where I was like, this is to me a bad meet, but I think it went pretty well. I think that second one I may have done in wraps. I cannot be sure. Or I may be done in sleeves. I'm not entirely
Was it a UPA Raw Powerlifting Championships?
So. Yeah.
So wraps, 275.
Yeah.
We live in some crazy times right now where there's not a day that I don't go on the internet and I see some BS crap about this research study or this research study. This isn't new. I've been in this industry for 4 decades. One thing that's helped me is 8 years ago, the Mass Research Review started and became a godsend. The Mass Research team are professional researchers that are also meatheads. So they've done this great job of being able to take all these topics and put them into this research review that I get every month. I'm excited to partner with them. I spoke with Eric Helms about this on the podcast. It's simple, it's easy. They're offering a 20% discount to all podcast listeners. The code is elitefts20. When you join, you get the research review, which is going to be sent to you every single month. That has 7 to 9 articles in there. The archive, which is 1,500 articles, thousands of videos. Just head over to massresearchreview.com and use the code elitefts20. The link will be in the description.
Yeah, because I think there was actually...
Is that 8? That's 639. Like 839. Like holy shit, that was like a motherfucker.
Yeah, so I think there may have been a gap there where I was running Shaco for a long time and I just couldn't afford to go to meets at the time. So when I would max out in the gym, it worked really well. Obviously, like I said, I started to incur some injuries, and then when I started to use wraps at that time, that's when my programming changed again. Going from a higher volume, like higher specificity to somewhat lower. That was when I was using...
You're also dropping weight throughout these years too.
Yeah, so I would kind of like try to systematically, like bulk and cut through these, like when I was in,
you're not dropping that much though.
No.
I mean, you're weighing in at 252, but then here's a 214 to 240.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in striking range.
Yeah. So I would always try to like bulk and cut because I figured, well, like you're going to probably put on the most muscle when you're in a surplus and it's going to support the hard training. So I would try to strategically time it, whether I did well or not. I would try to time it so that like, I'm in a surplus when I'm competing and when I'm going through these hard programs. But I think for those wrap meets, I actually used Blaine Sumner's programming. I don't know why I did, because it wasn't necessary. No, nothing against Blaine. Blaine's an incredible lifter, a really smart guy. But I think I knew, or I saw the success he had as a lifter competing in both raw and equipped. And I think that was around the time he was starting to get really good raw. And I was like, oh, well, he knows how to use wraps. I want to use wraps because I want to lift more weight. And so I started to use his methodology, which is a little bit more of like traditional, like linear periodization, like you could call like Ed Cohn style.
Was it once a week frequency?
Once or it was kind of, there was like templates in there. I think for the most part, I would use once a week squatting. I would probably do twice if I was just in sleeves because it was more manageable. But when I would throw the wraps on, because Blaine liked to go really heavy, it had to be once a week because I would literally be going like almost every week.
Well, the reason I ask is I think later on when the squats really got big, he pulled it down to like twice a month.
Yeah. So
that wouldn't have been good for you.
Yeah. So no, he didn't put any of stuff like that, as far as I'm aware, into his programs. I think it was all very like generalized templates. And so for that, the majority were 1 to 2 times a week, kind of depending upon the phase of the training, right? So like an off season would probably be like something like twice, but like in a meet prep cycle when he's expecting people to use equipment or be going as heavy as possible, then it was a 1 time a week.
All right. So now you've gone through 531 through Chico.
Yep.
And now you're into basic linear.
Yep.
What happened in 2019 when the bottom fell out here where the total's like 1570 something?
I remember that. Yeah. So that was after I took a long time off. That was
like 2
right.
years.
Yeah. So that was actually kind of like the last couple of years of my college career. That was actually when I met my wife.
Oh, so it's
Towards the
her
end.
fault.
It is definitely not her fault. It is no, it was not in the slightest actually. So that was towards the end of my college career. There was just a lot of change going on. And I remember I took like 6 months off of training, which I had never done before, really haven't done since, besides COVID when I couldn't get to a gym to train in. And so I remember I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back to powerlifting. I'm gonna do a meet. It was always something I was like itching in my brain. I think I had gotten so like locked in or all in at the time, to at least like the extent of locked in or all in, that I knew I was like, I maybe I need a break. I just need some, like, the pressure valve needed to be released. So, when I was with her in the first stages of our relationship, I was like, I don't really give a fuck about lifting too much. And then after a while, I'm like, I need to get back to the gym. Like, I need that sense of purpose. I was starting to feel those old feelings of like inadequacy start to kind of come up. I didn't have any sort of outlet.
Did you feel the addiction starting to pull?
Yeah, it's always kind of there. It's always kind of like a voice in your head, but during times of like high stress or maybe like dissatisfaction, it's a bit louder. And so at the time, I felt it, but it was also just like, I needed something, right? Because like, um, it I didn't have like any sort of like passion to pursue. Like I would spend time with her, which I loved, and I would, have work. And then there was like this other time where it was just like, well, what do I do with myself? Like I can keep playing video games, I guess, but I don't feel like a purpose. I don't feel like I'm doing anything. I don't feel like I'm putting anything out there. I just didn't feel accomplished, I guess, or satisfied. And so,
Were you graduated at the time?
yes, I was graduated at the time, and I was kind of like aimless at that point too, right? Because I was like, well, I have this weird psychology degree that I don't think I'm going to go back for, at least right now. I'm working at Walmart, and I'm like, because that's kind of like where I had worked through, or worked at during like part of my college career. So I'm like, this is kind of like a dead end. Like, what do I do with myself? Like, where am I gonna go? And so to go back, that was when I started to go back to the gym. I'm like, all right, I need to do another meet. Like, I need to kind of like, I think this is going to help me get things back on track, and it's going to be, if I do well, it's going to be really easy for me to shift back into that, because now I have like momentum to build up to, right? Like I have something that's going well for me. And if I don't go well, or the things go terribly, which for me, that was probably one of my first meets where I look at, I'm like, I did terrible. It's going to fuel me to like lock in on all those variables again, and kind of take things more seriously, kind of structure my life in a more organized manner, versus just kind of going through life in what I felt like was like half asleep, just kind of like, not necessarily interacting with life, but just kind of like going through things, going through the motions. And so going through that meet, I remember,
well, leading into the meet, that's
yeah,
kind of it's interesting, because while you're in college, you got to balance, working part-time, as you just noted, classes,
yeah,
right, and the training. So in a way, there's structure in the way
yeah,
that things are unstructured.
yeah,
So now you're out of college, and
it's not there.
part of you is like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can train whenever I can do all these things in the most perfect environment, right? But that environment presents itself, and then there's no purpose.
Yeah.
And it falls apart because the structure fell apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is probably a huge benefit of college at the time, was I had to, whether or not I was serious about it, I at least felt some sort of obligation to go to these classes at certain times. And,
Well, it forces you to actually have to go train at a certain time
yes.
too, because if you don't, well, you can't make it up the next day because you have 3 classes that day and work that day. So everything fits in its box. But if I understand what you're doing correctly, were you picking your classes around training?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So the training was this is what's interesting, right? The training was being positioned first, then everything else. Then you graduate, right? And now you're not putting the training first, and you're wondering why everything else is not finding its place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Looking back, it was kind of like I flip-flopped that order. I just kind of went about it the wrong way. I think there's another added wrinkle in that, I've had like girlfriends in the past, but like Cheyenne, my wife now, was like the person I felt like I really connected with, and like, obviously because I married her.
Yeah,
but
I hope so.
yeah, exactly. And so, to be completely frank, like I wanted to spend as much time with her as I possibly could. And I was like, I love powerlifting, and this wasn't a conscious decision I made, but it was just like powerlifting kind of fell by the wayside during that. And while it was away, I didn't realize how pivotal or important it was to me until it was gone. And it wasn't super apparent until like after I had it back in my life as well. That was giving me structure. It was giving me, that outlet, to train, kind of in some ways like disconnect from the normal daily life, daily mundane things. So, but yeah, it was kind of weird how I went from being all in on powerlifting when it was potentially more stressful in my life in terms of like scheduling to now I have more free time, but now I'm not choosing to focus on it in some ways.
So we'll just say that next meet back was just getting back into it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was rough because I think part of it was because I hadn't competed in a long time. And that's why a lot of the guys I coach, like I want them to compete not as frequently as possible, but I think they should be like on a schedule of competing. So that way they don't lose touch. They kind of have that schedule that I didn't for that time, right? It's, like we all go through school, like you're saying, you have that schedule to stick to. And I think when you kind of get into the real world, you lose that. But if you have like meets going on, everything kind of falls into place. It's easier for some people to have that routine if they have, a meet every 6 to 7 months. And it kind of helps them stay on track. Yeah.
Well, leading up to that, we have, the 531, the linear periodization, you have the Chico.
Yeah.
Then you have this meet. She comes into the picture.
Yep.
And now everything with powerlifting just, starts to go up. So my assumption looking through this is you figured it out. Like somewhere around this time period, you figured out that all these programs need to become your program.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Yeah, I would say that was part of it because I think for that meet, at the time I was using Juggernaut AI. So that was when that became very popular. And at that time, whether I knew it or not, I was kind of starting to like learn how to coach myself. Like I was kind of doing some coaching stuff at the same time, but that program gave me a great thing, which was it gave me kind of like a template and I knew what I needed at the time to progress. And so it gave me, like when you bowl, right? Like you have bumpers, right? They kind of keep you, from, going in the gutter, right? But you can still kind of like mess up a little bit. You have like a more freedom. So I use that program as a way that some people might use like the West Side barbell, like conjugate, like template as it were, to kind of structure their own training. And so I was taking things that I learned from those previous programs of like 531 of, like, okay, you're starting light, you're always leaving a little bit in the tank, like you're selecting, these movements for accessories because they're going to carry over. You have like your KPIs, like your key performance indicators, like these things carry over well. And then you have like Shaco where I'm learning things like, okay, like you as an individual can handle like a lot of volume, but you can also like learn how to hold your technique under tremendous amounts of volume and fatigue, right? And you don't necessarily have to feel very good all the time to perform well. And there's this thing called like the delayed transformation or like super compensation where, you may feel like crap and, your numbers may not be at peak when you're like 3-4 months out of a meet, and that's fine. They don't have to be. And then I'm learning from like the program from Blaine Sumner of like, okay, like, and this is how you can kind of orchestrate everything and like harmonize everything in terms of like, volume kind of comes down, intensity stays the same or escalates over time in order to produce this, peak effect, so that you can have the best results on the platform. And at the same time, I'm still, working on my nutrition. I'm still trying to keep that as locked in as I can. I'm actually, managing my sleep very well. It was actually around the time that I got a CPAP too, because I have sleep apnea. So that was a huge thing too. But yeah, so I kind of like took all those things and started using that program as a base, and I would like plug things in and I would move things around. I was like, I don't know if I need that. I'm going to move this over here. I'm like, oh, well, it wants me to do this for like 3 or 4 months. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm actually going to do this and this and this. Like I'm actually going to focus on hypertrophy because I'm coming from, being detrained. So I'm actually going to do like these higher rep sets, try to put some like muscle back on, at the time, and, so on and so forth.
Well, what I like about all this, and part of the reason why I wanted to have this discussion, is you're we say fuck around and find out, right? So
Yeah.
you haven't had a coach through this whole thing. You're just kind of like figuring it all out, but you're sticking to the programs, right? And the programs that you're going through, one has a high threshold. So you're determining what your maximum effective dose is.
Yep.
And you're also figuring out what your minimum effective dose is. Kind of the 5-3-1 plays on what's the minimum that you have to be able to do outside of whatever the AMRAPs and stuff like that are, which was just to help reset points.
Yeah.
Right. But you take those away. It's like minimal, maximal. Now, you know, this is way too much. This is not enough. Right. The linear kind of like fits in the middle in this weird, ugly stepchild type of place.
Yeah.
But it works, right? Obviously, because that's what the majority of everybody does. But you've learned how to kind of auto-regulate based upon anchoring minimum and maximum.
Yep.
Right. And this is going to become interesting because you work as a coach, which is helping people to anchor all these things. Whereas through your own experience and through the experience of most of the people I know, the best way to anchor those things is for you to just figure it out yourself. Right. But a lot of things can be the guardrails that you just noted, because the Juggernaut AI, if I remember correctly, it's kind of a block periodization model.
Yes, exactly.
With a little auto regulation kind of built in. So where your top set can be this or this, it just needs to be in this range.
Correct. Yeah. And then the back offs are basically determined whatever you hit off the top set. So it's like a percent drop down. So if you hit 600, it'll say like drop 10% to 540 or something like that.
Yeah, which is helping that auto regulation on a daily basis, not just the first movement, but it plays into the back down sets, which also play into those other sets. Right. So you're learning how to train yourself really effectively. Right. Did you know that during this time period?
No, not
because
really.
You can see what happened. Like as soon as you, and this is, everybody should go look at your, you know, open powerlifting to be able to see, because you can see what happened. Boom. Right now you're total, you're up close to 2,000. You know, like we can say 500 pounds, you know, but that 15, whatever, wasn't really.
2,000 wasn't too far.
It really wasn't indicative of what you could have done. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Be great for marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely helped because eventually I was sponsored by them for a little bit. So yeah, it was cool to say, oh, like Matt went from a 15 whatever total to 2K with our program. So it definitely worked.
So now, once remember when I talked about those the 3 peaks, now you're kind of at the top of this second peak, right? And you're riding that out. It's great while it's going. Right. But then it doesn't just always work that way.
Peaks have to have a valley.
So, but the key thing with how long can you hold that peak, right? Not the peak of the meet with a detraining and all that other shit. Just how long can you hold that, say, trajectory. 1900 to 2K. 2K. How long can you hold that and stay together? Right. Because the first year may not be that bad. You're a little, but to do that over a period of 2 years, 3 meets or something like that?
I think so.
Things get dicey. Right. So how did you manage that when things were getting dicey?
So I think it comes back to what I did during college was still positioning a lot of my life to be around powerlifting. You know, a lot of, whether you call that a skill or not, but I was still like trying to find jobs that would allow me to focus on training as being like a top priority. At this point, I was starting to understand that, you know, I can't make powerlifting my number one priority because, you know, at the time I'm with Cheyenne and things are getting more serious. As well as I'm getting older, I understand that, like, you know, I need money to, you know, compete in powerlifting. I need money for the food, my rent, so on and so forth. So it went from the only thing to it's okay. Now it's like my top 2 or 3 priority, probably still very much near the top. And, beyond that, I think it was staying on top of like certain variables, like making sure I was never missing a meal, is making sure that I was tracking my calories, my macros, making sure that I was getting as much sleep as I possibly could, using a CPAP because I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. So making sure that was on point. How did that come about? Did that come about because she was bitching and you're snoring all the time? No, actually, that's a really good story. So I first noticed I had some indication of having sleep apnea actually in college when I did my first meet. So I gained all that weight really fast. I was never been a good sleeper. Like I've just have always had sleep problems, whether I wasn't sleeping enough or not being super rested. It still kind of continues, even though I have a CPAP. It's always just kind of been a thing. But I noticed when I would sleep at school, they had these terrible mattresses and like they were like just terrible. So I would sleep terrible, the 5 days that I was at school, and I would elect to go home over the weekend because I could sleep in my own bed. The mattress was firmer. I could keep my like neck propped up or elevated. So like, you know, unknowingly at the time, I'm keeping myself from snoring as much or like, choking on my own airway. And, my mom would be like, "You're snoring a lot, just like your dad, like, maybe you have sleep apnea." I'm like, "No, it can't be," but, at the time it is. And so eventually I get a sleep study done because it's so bad, like to the point where like I'm falling asleep in class. But, at the time I'm like, well, I got to keep eating food. I got to keep gaining weight. I got to keep getting bigger and stronger. And so go through
That's
this.
funny because
Yeah.
it comes with the territory because especially at the time, because I'm sure if you were asking me back then, I would be, yeah, it's just normal, dude. It's just part of getting big.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's all you hear, right? And like, I mean, it's funny because you have like, I guess I would say like success leaves clues, and in some ways it wasn't the right clue, but all you hear from all these people that, like training really takes it out of you, and like sleep's not great, right? And all the people I'm looking up to are these super jack guys, and I figured, well, I'm just training really hard, and it's just kind of how it goes, right? But at the time, I didn't realize how what they were describing was different than what I was experiencing, to where I could literally sit down and within like 30 seconds, if I wanted to, I could close my eyes, I could be asleep. No matter basically where I was. I never had any issues with like a car accident or anything like that, thank God. But it was bad at the time. And so I get the sleep study done, and they couldn't really figure out what it was. I just know that I fit some certain criteria where they diagnosed me with narcolepsy. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. Like, because I never had these bad of issues when I was in my running days and like later, high schools. And I was like, but I've gained all this weight, and like sleep apnea is something that some powerlifters start to talk about as time goes on, especially the heavyweight powerlifters. I'm like, I think it's this. Plus, my dad has it, my mom has it to like a slighter degree, whether or not she wants to admit it. But yeah, so I start looking into like sleep apnea, like how you deal with that. And I was like trying to get a CPAP, and like the process was like a nightmare. I was like, I'm just going to buy my own. So I did. And I got my own CPAP. I learned how to like titrate it for myself. I wouldn't recommend anyone do this, by the way. You should always go through your medical provider. But
yeah, but I think a lot of these, I agree. I probably need to say that I agree. But a lot of them actually regulate themselves.
Yeah.
They're self-regulating.
Yeah. So at the time, I always figured it was just the one setting, because so for anyone that doesn't know, CPAP is just like a continuous pressure airway something. It sets out one pressure the entire night. Now they have things called like an APAP, where there's a range of pressures, and as your airway might constrict or get blocked, it will sense that as there's like less, there's like a sensor basically determining that, and it's like, okay, we're going to pump up the pressure, and that will, cause the blockage to stop. And you can look at your machine afterwards and get that data and figure out, okay, like I actually was having a lot of apneas or like choking events last night. Maybe my pressure needs to be higher. So that's kind of how you can titrate your own device. And then I actually had to get a BiPAP, which is like the max they get to. And this will be something we can maybe touch on later, of like how I knew at my time at 275 was coming to an end. Was the BiPAP, you can actually get super granular within the minutia, and you can like put exactly what you want for your inspiration, your inhalation when you're breathing, and your expiration. And like generally speaking, most of your sleep apnea events actually will happen when you're exhaling. And so, I learned towards the end, like I had my machine maxed out to what they make. The CPAP goes to 25, and so does APAP. BiPAP, the exhalation pressure, goes to 25. I had it maxed out, and I was still having like notable amount of events where I was still very, very tired during the day. And so that's when I learned like, oh shit, like I am so pushing this so hard that like even the machine that's keeping me alive at night is barely doing so. Like
when you first got the CPAP, did you gain weight?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was starting to gain weight, and cause I was like, I had that meet that I came back from. I'm like, this is fucking bullshit. Like I know I'm stronger. Like I did all this stuff in training, and I'm like, uh, I know I'm stronger. And funny enough, before I got a CPAP, she would laugh. There's a self-treatment you can do. You can play a didgeridoo, like the Aboriginal stuff. You can do that because it teaches circular breathing. But I was doing that, and I'm like, I know my sleep's good. I feel good. I'm like, man, like what's going on? I'm like, fuck it. I knew I was stronger at these higher weight classes, so I'm just gonna go do that. Little if I knew if I stayed at that weight class, I probably would have gotten stronger anyway. But I was just short-sighted. I was, thinking too emotionally. I wasn't objective. I'm like, I'm just gonna gain as much weight as I can within reason, and I'm just gonna train my ass off, and I'm gonna, get as heavy as I want to, because I don't really have like any sort of specific thing holding me back. So now I have like a steady job. Like I can eat as much as I want. I have all these things going for me.
I want to take a second to throw a quick shout out to my friends over at Mastonomics. They have some of the greatest t-shirts. Their memes are incredible. Their YouTube gym tours are great. These drink spotter things, I got about 7 of them out here. Snap them on power racks, put smelling salts in it, drinks. I think they hold up to 10 pounds, or they have different sizes of these. These are great. They made coasters out of stall mats, which is amazing. But what I really wanted to let you know is to go check out gymradar.com. They launched a website that's going to help people find home gyms that they can train at, and to be able to put your own home gym on there and not only be able to find where it is, but see what they actually have. And it's also great for product reviews because people are putting the products that they have in this Gym Radar. Just go check it out. It's great. So it's www.gymradar.com. And also check out Mastonomics. Check out their website, check out their Instagram. The memes are great. And check out their YouTube.
And so, yeah, that was kind of what led to learn like getting eventually the CPAP, because over time as I was gaining that weight, I'm like, man, I'm starting to get tired. And like that's when I was kind of connecting the dots. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what was happening in high school. I have a lot more knowledge now. I think I need to get a CPAP.
Yeah, one of the funny things that originally Louis Simmons hated CPAPs, right? Just absolutely hated them. And when I had my sleep study, I had to go there. I mean, it was a big pain in the ass, right? But his reason for it, because we would have, I can think of 3 people that, one, it was funnier and shit. He was putting his shoes on. He was putting his chucks on. So he's got his foot folded over his knee, putting his shoe on, and just fell the fuck asleep, right? So we'd have people fall asleep between sets, right? Just like normal, like wake him up, he's got to do a set, right? And a couple of them would start to have, I called it purple leg syndrome, right? So, I mean, they're going to die, right? It's like you're pre-diabetic, you have sleep apnea, you're going to die. And so we would say, you need to get a sleep study. And Louis would be like, that's the worst fucking thing any of these big dudes could do. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, explain this to me. I don't get this. He says, because they don't recover for shit right now. So if we actually can help them sleep, then they're going to recover better. They're going to gain more weight and be a bigger problem. I'm like, I kind of see what you're talking about. In other words,
way I see it. Yeah.
In other words, they just need to lose weight.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but if they don't lose weight between now and like this next meet, they could die.
Yeah.
So what's more important? And every one of them that got the CPAP would gain weight.
Oh, of course.
Right. Not only 3, you would be the third. There's only been 3 that I know that went from that CPAP to the BiPAP, into what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like now you can't even breathe.
Yeah.
Like you need a machine to breathe at night. You can't exhale, you can't inhale. If somebody turns this off or the power goes off, you're dead.
Yeah. It was, this is kind of embarrassing, but it's funny. There'd be times when I would just be like walking around doing things, and I would literally feel like my airway, like I would do this snort because I had so much fat on my face or in my throat, where I would literally just be like sitting here like this and be like a bulldog. And I'm like, at the time, like, oh, that was weird, whatever. And towards the end, I'm like, oh, I am so fat. I'm having trouble breathing.
Did you ever measure your neck circumference during that time?
I did. I think,
Like
my old training,
22 maybe?
yeah, one of my old training partners, I had like a contest and we like tried to measure our necks and I think I beat him. I think I had like 22 or 23 inch neck.
Yeah, like
and
anything over 16 is like CPAP territory,
yep.
right?
Yeah, and I remember he was really good at all these other lifts. He was like a strong man, you know, and I think that was one of the things I had him on because like I beat him in squat, bench, and deadlift. Actually, he was a better bencher. And one of the things that he just like got really weirdly pissed about in a funny way was that my neck was so much bigger. I think he had a 19 and I was like 22 and I just would lord that over him because he just would get so mad about it. But yeah, it was it was freaking big, man.
Yeah, we'd have contests where we measure neck, head,
Yep.
right? Because your head blows up too.
Oh,
and then waist.
yeah.
Right. And then whoever had the three biggest.
You're the king.
Yeah. But fortunately today, you know, people have learned from those mistakes and kind of dialed it back. So it's when did you start to try to work off of the BiPAP? Or are you still on that?
So I still use it. Honestly, just because it's all I know and it's, you know,
it's comfortable after a while.
It's comfortable. Yeah.
Did it take a while to get used to the CPAP?
Yes and no. So I have some clients, actually I have a client right now who actually just got a CPAP and I told him my experience, which was, you know, at first, and maybe you can attest because do you have a CPAP or?
Yeah, I've went back down to just nasal pillow.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So like when I first started, it was really tough to come to terms with like sleeping with this thing on my face. I feel like I was in the movie Alien with like a face hugger on my face. I'm like, this is terrible. And so it took me a long time to get accustomed to it. And then even when I would fall asleep at times, I would wake up in the middle of the night with the mask halfway across the room. And it wasn't until I had my first night with it on where I slept through the night and I just had this amazing restorative sleep. I don't remember the date, but I remember it vividly. I'm like, oh my God, like I have not felt like this in a long time. And so I was telling my lifter that I coach currently, like he just got a CPAP. And I'm telling him, you know, like, hey, like this is what you can expect. Like this is what happened for me. This is how you can kind of get like accustomed to the mask, you know, wear it, just wear the mask for like half an hour for a couple days at night, you know, when you first get it, and then start putting on low pressure and then try to sleep halfway through the night and then the whole night, so on and so forth. But in terms of where I'm at now, yeah, I still use it. Because at the time when I bought it, I didn't have good insurance. I didn't really have any through my job at Walmart. And so I went back to get a sleep study done and I got it done. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to start you off from like ground zero in terms of like my pressures. And I'm like, well, I know what I need. Like, and I don't know if I can justify me feeling like a zombie for like a week, 2 weeks, a month until you titrate to what my numbers already are. And so admittedly, I've still been kind of doing my own thing. Like I have like a secondhand unit that I got from a guy. He actually works at these sleep study clinics and he gets like some of the used machines. So I have that one, I have a backup, and I just kind of like monitor my own pressure. And it's been a lot better since I'm now down at like, you know, competing 198, walking around at 215 to 220. And so I've just stuck with it because I didn't want to go through that process again. The concept of like, you know, having all this stuff on my plate of, you know, like work, coaching, you know, lifting, you know, obviously being a husband, you know, all these responsibilities, and be like, okay, well now we're going to pull the floor out from underneath you and you have to kind of go at this with like little to no sleep. It's like, I can't do that, man. You know, I wish I could, like if I could take a week off of all responsibilities or a couple weeks until they can just be like, okay, you know, this is the pressure we're going to use. Like, but it doesn't fit into my life.
I like the advice that you gave there because it took me a few months to get used to it, but
yeah,
I used to sleep on my stomach.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So that was the biggest problem is now I had to sleep on my back. So I had all these years of sleeping on side or stomach to back. And then after a few months, the way I got through it or got acclimated to it is I went from the full mask to a nasal pillow, which made it a little bit easier. But then I would put it on when we were watching TV at night.
Exactly. That's what I did
just
too.
to kind of get used to it. Then I built barriers around me with pillows.
Yeah.
So I couldn't roll. Once I and it's probably great for my back health to actually learn how to sleep on my back, right? But I couldn't do it when I was big without the CPAP because you can't breathe.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you're like off to your side or, you know, figure some fucked up way with pillows to lay on your stomach.
Yeah, you're like folded in a pretzel to like your body's most ideal position where you can still breathe, but it's not exactly the most conducive to like feeling comfortable or like having a deep restful sleep.
Right. So CPAP humor. Right. Yeah. So now, when's the last time you changed your hose?
dude, I can't even tell. Probably like, if I had to give myself and be super generous, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, but I'll be honest, it's probably been like a year. I try to, I don't try.
I ask this shit because it's the because you got the hose, you have the little filters, which I don't think I've ever changed once. No. Like the first month, you're like changing everything like every month because they're sending you all this shit.
Yeah, and
I won't change a hose until it breaks. And my hose right now has got duct tape. One around here, then one around the bottom thing here, and it's the water reservoir thing. I haven't put water in that in like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm the same. I have I have my hose.
Don't do this.
Please. This is.
But everybody does.
Please stay on top of your CPAP maintenance. I have like a extra hose, laying around in case mine gets like like the plastic webbing or whatever kind of like deteriorates or whatever. But I do not clean it or like change as much as I should. Maybe that would make me more all in.
Yeah. Well, I do wonder sometimes, like, what am I breathing through this gross ass thing? It can't be good to be pushing that straight into my lungs.
Yeah, probably all those microplastics.
But then it's like,
no,
fuck it, I'm fine. I've been doing it forever. But I ask everybody, like, and the longest I've heard is like 3 years.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, how in the hell is it not like got a
deteriorated
hole or some shit?
Right? Yeah,
because that's what will happen is it will start like blowing air.
Yeah,
and not through here, but it will like
there's a little like perforation,
and then it'll whistle.
Yeah,
right?
That's how I know. That's how I knew I needed a new one, because I'll be breathing. It was like, yeah, and I'd be like in the middle of the night, like, what is that noise? And I'd be like kind of feeling my pressure in my mask. I'm like, oh, I gotta order a new one like tonight, tomorrow. So, yeah, exactly. You get that little signal.
So once you figure all that out, you're going up through there. You have the CPAP. Yep. But what are the other things with the training? Are you regulating to be able to stay at the level that you're at now?
It's a good question. And maybe I don't have a great answer, because I think I'm still doing a lot of the same things, right? So like I'm prioritizing powerlifting. It's gone from my top 3 to maybe my top 5 priorities. I'm still very meticulous with like my nutrition. In fact, that might actually be like the thing I've gotten better about. One of the things is like being better with my nutrition. So before it was just like protein and calories, right? And eventually it started to be like, okay, well, like I have to start timing this a little bit better. And so I started throwing that little nugget in of like, okay, we're going to time things around my workouts. And then it started to become like, okay, well, like macronutrient quality, right? Because it used to just be like chicken rice, Fairlife rice, and then like fiber powder, like a fiber burrito to hit my fiber. And then like maybe if I was lucky, like broccoli. And then like now it's like, okay, well now we're going to start looking at like, okay, now I'm hitting, my micros, right? Like I'm eating, like spinach and rice for one meal with like some hard boiled eggs. So I'm hitting all like my B vitamins and stuff like that. And then, you can kind of see where I'm going, but trying to make sure like I'm hitting all my bases. So I'm not only can be strong, but healthy as well. Cause at some point, like you can be strong without being healthy, but not for long. Right? Like at some point you have to pay that tax. Some other things I think are just maturing as a lifter. And what I mean by that is understanding that not every meet is going to be a PR meet. Not every meet's going to be a good meet. Sometimes you could have what you might consider a bad meet, but you can use it as like data. You learn more about your training. And sometimes like looking at things from a seasonal perspective. And what I mean by that is what I've said before, like it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so understanding that you're going to have certain times in your life to where you're not going to have peak performance based upon whatever you have going on outside the gym, right? So like, for instance, I just competed in March, and I, now that it is, later in the year in May, I have meets basically from right after that meet all the way until like August that I'm going and handling lifters at. It's a busy season sort of for work, my day job. And so, I'm not going to be able to put priority number 1 as powerlifting, right? Like I'm going to have these other things because I have other obligations, and coming to terms with like, that's okay. It can't be your everything all the time, because number 1, that's just not how life works. Number 2, you're going to get sick of it. Like whether you believe it or not, like nothing can be your main thing all the time. Like there's seasons to it. And number 3, like sometimes like you learn the most when you're away from certain things, right? So like I'll tell people that I'm coaching, they're like, they might have like a great meet and I'll pull them away from things that were working pretty well. And they're like, well, why don't we just keep pushing? I'm like it'll be there when you get back. Like you have these things that, unless you're like a beginner in which you can just kind of train the same way over and over and over. But like as these people get stronger and more accomplished and they have these life responsibilities, it's like, okay, like I would love to have us keep doing the same programming, just have us keep hammering the same things. Cause I think for a good amount of time it'll work, but it's not going to work for the long term, right? It's going to be like it might work really well for like 2 months after the meet, and then we're going to spend 3 or 4 months trying to figure out what that next thing is, versus I'm really confident in these other things that may work 75% as well, but it's going to work for like 5 or 6 months, and it's actually going to not only get you stronger in the short term, but it's also going to kind of help cement you for further games in the long term. And that's through like getting more muscular, training different positions, having like variety in your training, having novelty in your training, understanding that you can't just do the same things over and over because you're going to get bored or mentally stale. I think that's probably been the things that I learned that's kind of kept me where I'm at, is understanding that it's seasonal, right? Like it's not just like squat, bench, and deadlift with high specificity all the freaking time, or always going heavy all the freaking time, or you can't really have both. You have to learn to have trade-offs. Taking more care of my nutrition is another thing. I think those are like mainly the 2 things I touched on, unless there's a third that I'm just blanking on.
The one thing that I've seen speaking to all you guys, the lifters that are competing at the highest levels, is because you just said the powerlifting is like priority number 5. And when I hear that, it's first off, we can't prioritize life, right? Things are what it is, right? Everything's just is, right? So there's no 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah. But if we assume there is a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and when powerlifting was 1, right? So if we go back to that time when powerlifting was 1, and then we look at all the outputs, because you have inputs, you have outputs. We look at all the outputs of when it was number 1. The nutrition's on point, your rest is on point, your training's being auto-regulated, it's working well, everything is on point, right? So it's there. Now, if we look at when you say it's number 5 and we look at the outputs are the same as what they were when it was number 1, right? The difference between that number 1 and that number 5 is you're not spending all day long thinking about what's going to create those outputs, because you have the 15 years of going in to know what creates those outputs. Yeah. So when it was number 1 back then, time-wise, it really didn't take that much more physical time. Yeah. Making the meals, maybe the meals, you can make them faster, right? But marginally not that much time. Yeah. But the time that you're thinking about all those things to be able to get it to that higher level. Yeah. Reading about this training, all those deep dives and all those little rabbit holes, which is necessary to get to the point, right? But once you're at that point, it's not really necessary anymore. Yeah. Right. Because yes, there needs to be focus on like longevity and how you're going to come back from nicks and dings and shit like that. But you don't have to go back through and revisit all this stuff because it was already established. Yeah. So I could say it still is number 1 because the outputs are the same as when it was number 1. Actually, a lot of the times the outputs are better, right? Because now there's a support system, which makes everything outside of it makes rest better. That's true. Right? Because you're not like running around trying to get laid all the time and, all this other extracurricular type crap that kind of plays into it. And I've seen that kind of the same across the board. And that's what creates that next jump, because the only thing you need to worry about now for your training is how to be healthy to display the strength that you already have. Because people get mad when I say this. You may not ever get stronger, right? But your ability to display the strength that you have hasn't been displayed to its greatest ability yet. Yeah, you just get better. Right? But what if you can keep that same strength, but learn how to display it better by being healthier, right? So being more mentally focused to be able to do those weights. So to go into a meet with only like 1 little injury instead of like 7. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So so that's kind of like coming full circle. Then there's another circle to where you're helping other lifters. Yeah. right? So now you got to help them go through this same 15-year journey that you've been on, but get them there in 7.
Yeah.
Right. So what have been the biggest challenges in doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing, almost always, and this, you probably hear this from other coaches, but it's true. A lot of times it's the things, at least that I found outside the gym, that are the obstacles for some people's training. Because I think we all love to train, or I at least would hope we all love to train. We love to compete, or to a degree, but it's can be hard to, frankly, like, take the time after the gym and, okay, now you got to go eat your meals. You have to now, like, prep those meals, like, rather than going to bed on time, it's like, let's be honest, it's super easy, just scroll on your phone. That's way sexier of an idea than, like, hey, so, like, you're not super tired, like, just go to bed. Right. Versus, like, I'm going to, like, get these huge dopamine spikes from scrolling on my reels, or, like, talking to my friends, or spending time, with my girlfriend, staying up late watching, the new movie, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think a lot of it always comes down to the first thing is the external recovery variables. I think that whenever there's an issue with someone's training that I'm looking at, unless it's certain rare cases where I know the lifter very well and they've been with me a long time and I just know they're the type of lifter that's exactly like me, which we could probably talk about, like, how certain lifters, like, you can kind of just tell, like, they're very similar to you. Like, I can tell some people, it's like, okay, walk me through, the last 48 hours leading up to this session, or the last week. Like, how has your sleep been? Oh, well, it's not been that great. Like, okay. So, like, what about, like, work stress? Like, I know you said you have a lot going on right now. It's a busy season for you. Is that still the case? It's like, yeah, like, work's been pretty hectic. I haven't been able to get, as much done as I wanted, or, like, there's just, like, these big projects I have to work on. It's like, okay, what about nutrition? Like, how has your nutrition been? Like, well, I actually haven't been tracking. Like, okay. And so you start to, like, piece together. It's like, okay, well, like, I've seen a lot of bad programs, and, like, I think that even bad programs, like, can work. But the way I tell people is, like, the training's just a piece of the puzzle. Like, if we were to look at it as making a cake, what goes into the cake, or the recipe, are all those factors. It's your sleep, it's your stress management, it's your nutrition, it's your hydration, it's, your activity levels outside the gym, like getting certain amounts of steps, it's all these things, and the training going into the result of the meet, or, your next week of training. And if you're just putting these, frankly, like, shitty ingredients into the cake, you can't expect a good cake, right? Unless you're someone with a really good oven, which we could call genetics, or PEDs, or some combination thereof, right? Like, you're kind of stuck with what you got. So all you can do is really focus on those ingredients and making sure they're as high quality as you can. And, the oven's going to kind of take care of itself. You can't really change that yet, unless we have, like, genetic, modification through, like, CRISPR or something. So like, making sure first that your externals are as good as they can be for your situation or your lifestyle. Now, if you're someone who can only get 6 hours, it is what it is. If you're really busy and, you have, like, a certain job, like, it is what it is. Like, I was coaching this woman who was in the Air Force, and based upon, like, her lifestyle, sometimes she'd be, like, going from base to base, or she'd be going from, like, one state to another, like, very frequently. And, like, sometimes she just wasn't able to get as much sleep, or she wouldn't be hitting, certain things in the gym that maybe I would have liked her to. And it's like, but that's her lifestyle. Like, we can't really do much about that. But outside of that, making sure first that your externals, or that's what I like to call them, like, your recovery variables, are on point as they can be for you. The second biggest thing is almost always effort. And honestly, I could put that first, but I think externals are a little bit more important. Effort is usually the second thing I look at. It's really easy to say, like, yeah, I train hard, until you've trained hard. And that's something that people learn over time. Like, no one's just comes out the gate when they're a beginner, like, knowing how to train to the same level as, an elite level powerlifter, or to the same degree that they can, 10 or 15 years down the line, if they stick with it for a long time. And so with that, like, kind of teaching them over time, like, setting new benchmarks for effort. So, for instance, like, something you can do, or something I have done, is like even something like a leg extension. Like, okay, at the end of this block here, we've been having you do like 3 sets of 12 to 18 on leg extensions, right? Just to like fill them up with blood and so on and so forth. But for this next block, like at the end, we're going to do like those first 2 sets, and this last one, same weight, same rest periods. I want you to do an AMRAP, right? I want to see where you end up. And more often than not, when I do something like that with a lifter, they blow those first 2 sets out of the water. And it's like, well, why? Well, I tend to believe that for the most part, they're like either holding themselves back, or they just have not learned how to push themselves to those levels of high effort. And that's something that just takes time. It's really common for some lifters I look at when they're beginners and they're like, oh man, like that was a RP7 squat for a triple. And I'm like, really? Because it moved like a 5. But, I have to tell myself, at that time when I was in their shoes, I didn't know how to put maximal force into the bar. I didn't know how to orchestrate myself underneath the bar so that I was stable enough to even do that. And so I think effort is probably the second biggest thing that is a bottleneck for lifters to progress. And I think the last thing that I can touch on is long-term perspective. There's very few people that come into the sport, even though social media would have you convinced otherwise, that can come in and light the world on fire in their first, 3 to 5 meets. We see them. We see, phenoms come in, any sport that are just incredible, right? Like we have Wembanyama in like the NBA. Like he comes in from like France and he's just dominating, in his first couple of seasons. But in powerlifting, like a lot of us coming in, like you said, we're not like the best. We're not the front liners, right? Like we're not coming in as these genetic phenoms. A lot of people are just like average. And so coming to terms with that, this is going to take a while to potentially reach your goals, can be really hard for people. And making them aware of that fact, and that it's okay, and that, there's nothing wrong with them, right? Like it's totally normal for them to be, progressing at the rate that they're going at, is something I try to work on too, is like understanding that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And as long as you have those first 2 variables nailed to the best of your ability based upon your individual circumstances, like that third one will take care of itself. You just have to be patient and understand that it's going to take time, and don't necessarily go out there trying to compare yourself to everyone. I know the sport is a sport and we have to compete, but I think understanding that, comparison can be the thief of joy, especially now with open powerlifting, where I can literally look up, certain lifters and be like, oh man, like I'm gonna kick his ass at this next meet, or like vice versa, like shit, I'm gonna lose if we're in the same weight class. And understanding that like this is gonna take a while, like you have to learn how to pace yourself over the years, or over the, these training cycles, or even like a training block, right? Like learning to understand that it's about, planting seeds for the future, and understanding that it's going to perhaps take a while to get where you want to be. But if you're just doing the daily monotony, which is unfortunate, it can be monotonous, day in and day out, like you will get there. You just have to be patient.
Now, if I look at, because you mentioned the open powerlifting, and this is an exercise that I like to do with lifters a lot. If I just scan through, I don't know, the 20 meets or whatever that are on here. So there's always going to be meets that are not, right?
Yep.
But it goes all the way back to, I don't want to put my glasses on, what,
2013 or
2013, because there was a push-pull that was before that.
Yep.
All right. I can go through here and probably out of the 30 meets that are in here, I can probably find 3 that we would call standout.
Yeah.
That you would be like, you know what, that was a really good day, right? Or we do it with each lift.
Yeah.
Right. The squat was definitely on par here, here, and here, right?
Yep.
So out of 30 meets, we might be able to find 3 squats. We might be able to find 2 totals, that kind of play into that. And it doesn't matter who we look at. Like Henry Thompson, that he's got like 100 fucking meets. It's like the ridiculous how many meets he's on there, right? You can go through there and do the same thing. So if we just think, all right, over a decade, there were 3 really good squats.
Yeah.
2 or 3 really good totals. what makes this person, this other person think every meet they're going to do is going to be good?
I actually have kind of an answer for that. I think sometimes, number one, it's just like a lack of understanding. But I think if you compare powerlifting, maybe I'm wrong here, you can tell me your thoughts. I think powerlifting compared to other sports is different in that, let's say you play basketball, right? You're learning how to shoot a free throw. Like within one session, you can probably get your free throw from like terrible to okay. And over the course of a week, if you just shoot free throws every day, you might go from like okay to like pretty decent. And then over the course of a month, like you might be like, for where you're at, like you're great. But I think with powerlifting, because there is this component of like maximizing or filling out a weight class, putting on a certain amount of muscle tissue to, reach the zenith of your strength potential. I think things like that, like they just take time. And like for some sports like basketball, obviously that's still a component, but like I think there's less of a skill component in powerlifting than there is in other sports. And it's a lot of it's just like raw physicality, especially like raw powerlifting. And so people might be coming from other sports, or they might be expecting that same experience when they get into powerlifting. Like, yep, if I just squat, bench, and deadlift, like in 2 years, I'm going to be the world champ. Like I'm going to be Colton. That's just how it works, right? Because they're used to that feedback from, whether it's basketball or like golf or something like that, where it's like a little more technical. And you can reach the like peak of your technical ability pretty fast, or like, I guess where you're relatively at in that current moment in time. You can hit that somewhat faster versus powerlifting. It's like I have some lifters where their technique's great. And it's like, well, why aren't I getting stronger? It's like, look, like you're a beginner. Like you just don't have the muscle mass. Like you just have to get more muscular, and that's going to take time. Now, I'm not saying that like in order to hit your goals, it's going to take 5 years and then boom, like you're going to hit those goals. It's going to happen at the same, you're going to hit those goals as you're going, but to hit your peak, like you're going to have to become a different lifter.
I built elitefts in 1998, 27 years ago, with the aim to help educate as many people as I could in strength and conditioning. And the way to do that was to keep all the content complementary. The way that we've been able to do that since day one is by providing the best products possible to help your training program. If you can put the item in a gym bag or load plates on it, we have it, and it will work. Everything from SS yoke bars to American press bars, bands. We also have a strength equipment specialist staff that helps outfit home gyms, sport training centers, colleges that have over 3 decades of experience and also have spent a lot of time working as coaches, so they understand the flow of the weight room and how things actually get done. If you're serious about your training and you want to up your game and support the podcast and all the content that we provide, head over to elitefts.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout to receive 10% off your orders.
Like you're going to have to put on that tissue. You're going to have to, learn not only that, like to put on the tissue, but like learn the ins and outs of competing, like when should you take a third attempt if it's a risk? When should you, maybe save something on your third attempt squat because maybe you're a really big deadlifter. Like these are things that you don't necessarily, learn right away, right? Like these are things that are going to come over time. So I think that's probably why, is because they have these expectations from other sports, and they just have, those sports have different demands.
Yeah. If they think in a longer term sense, even with the examples that you gave of the muscle mass, I mean, if you just disseminate it down to, how much lean body mass can somebody really put on in a year, right? People will bullshit and lie, right? But it's 4 or 5 pounds, maybe 6. I mean, PEDs are going to increase it. Yes, it will increase it, but not by as much as what people think.
Yeah, maybe 2 times as much.
Yeah, and even with PEDs, you're still going to have a cap. It's just going to be a higher cap, right? So yeah, you're going, as you mentioned before with the cake, yeah, you're going to have a bigger oven, but you're going to still have a shittier cake at a later time.
Yeah.
It just might be a bigger cake, but it's still going to taste like shit.
Yeah.
But all the same issues are still going to come in to where the many years ago, there was a woman I was working with that wanted, she was close. She's maybe 50 pounds away from the all-time multiply squat record, right? And in her brain, she's like, I'll be able to get this in a year. Now, her form was terrible for multiply, which has less room for air.
Yeah.
And so the way, and it was kind of like a battle. Like, I know I can do this. I want to go heavy. I want to go heavy. I want to go heavy. It's like, last thing you need to do is to go heavy. What you need to do is to fix your fucking shitty technique.
Yeah.
And so I kind of laid it out in a way of, let's assume that based upon your past meet performances, to where 1 out of every 3 meets, you had a really, really good squat. You broke a PR. So we need 3 meets just for the PR. So 3 meets over, that's 18 months that we're looking at now, because you're competing twice a year. All right. Now that's assuming that everything goes like it was before, and that's just chipping a PR. Right. So now if we extend this out a little bit more, we're looking at 6 meets, right? And out of the 6 meets, we already know, based upon everybody else, they're not going to all go well.
Exactly.
Right. So now we're looking at like 2.5 years, 3 years. So if we were just to take one 3-month block, not lift over 405, and just build the best technique that you possibly can. Right. Yeah. You might get a little weaker. Right. But then when you start building back up on that, you're going to be in a better position, because it's 3 years. So what is 3 months out of 3 years? See, I was trying to sell her on fixing this technique, which is going to take 3 months, right? But in her brain, it's like 3 months. I want to do this before the end of the year. I can't do this, and spend that time on the 3 months. And it's like, no, you're going to actually just keep doing what you've been doing, squatting way too high, bombing out, and all this other kind of shit, because you don't dial it back, because you're not looking at the factual, of how this all works.
Yeah.
Right. And with the muscle mass, it's another good one. Go look at somebody that's been competing for 8 years and look at their weight class fluctuation. Right. It took them 3 years to be able to move up a weight class.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually fill it out. Yeah.
Right. And that's that. And maybe it could have happened sooner, because a lot of guys move up too late, because they don't move up until the cut becomes so bad it's fucking up their meat.
Yeah.
Right. But these people they're not even at that level. It's just, but if they thought, and it's tough, it's a tough sell, because you're trying to sell quadrennials, right? And people are like, oh, that's too long. It's too long. I can't do that. I'm like, yeah, but you fucking went through college. That took 5 years. You went through high school. That took 3 years. You went through junior high. That took 3 years. You can do long things.
Yeah.
Like, you've already done it before.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So, yeah.
So it's weird, because it's just changing the narrative to what they can understand, where the stress is kind of another one, like the work stress. I know you get this one, because people say that they have the work stress, and I understand that. We all deal with that.
Of course.
But my follow-up question is, all the time?
Not all the time.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, so it's not all the time. So it's like, even if it's in a day, like all day, like, is it like just an hour of the day?
I think we tend to focus on the negatives, and it kind of clouds our perspective of maybe there was only terrible for 10 minutes, but that terrible was so terrible, that's all we can conceive of. Right?
Yes, but okay, so it's terrible for 10 minutes, the quicker that you can forget about it and move on, move to the next task, would be equivalent to your ability to recover after you do a hard set of squats. Right. Right. You do a hard set of squats, it doesn't do really well. Right. And maybe you fucked up, your foot was in the wrong spot. You kind of know what was wrong. The last thing that you're going to do is get right under the bar without resting.
Yeah.
You're still going to rest. You're going to realize what went wrong. Then you're going to put it together, forget about it, then do it on the next one. We know all this, like from training. But what people do with the stress is they'll have that bad set of squats, and the equivalent would be, you know what, fuck it, I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm not going to come back to the gym, and I'm just going to worry about this set of squats until I come back in 4 days or 7 days to do it again. And you know what? I'm going to come in thinking that my squat's going to suck.
Yeah.
Like, why, you see what I'm saying? Like, why don't they take what they already know and then apply, we're getting into the psychology shit,
Yeah.
but then apply it to these other things instead of just brewing it over
Mm-hmm.
and over 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 and over.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that there's a lot to unpack there and there's a lot to talk about. I think with that, it's when I have lifters that have like a bad day, I kind of talked about, or I was giving that example with the externals, right? Or your recovery variables, right? Like I'm kind of going down this checklist of like, okay, this is like, are all these things in line, right? So with something like that, it's kind of talking to lifters and being like, okay, what was going on going into the set? I'll have them talk to me about like the external variables like I do. And then I'll talk about, okay, like I'll go over their technique. I'll look at things. I'll be like, okay, so this is what I saw, like, going into the set in terms of like your walkout, your setup, the way you were like pacing yourself during the actual set, your intent, like I could tell mentally either you're with it or you're not, all these things. And then kind of showing them like, okay, these are all the things that you can control, right? And then there's some things that just happen, right? Like whether or not we admit it, like if you have like an internal locus of control or you believe that you have a lot of control over your results, your destiny, like there's some things unfortunately like that just kind of fall out of that purview. Sometimes you can come in and you can have the best training session, you can have like, sorry, I should backpedal. You can have like the best sleep, the best nutrition, the best mindset going to the gym. You can have your best music on, you get your favorite bar or whatever it may be. And sometimes you just have a bad session. Sometimes that can happen with meets, right? I'll tell people like you can either have a good prep, a good meet, a good prep and a bad meet. You can have a bad prep and a bad meet, and the very rare, but it happens, and that's happened in some of my open powerliftings. You can have a bad prep and a good meet, and sometimes those like that sounds very unsatisfying and sounds very frustrating, but it's just the way life is, and like understanding that you can't control for everything, and sometimes all we can do is just control what we can control, and if sometimes we're given a bad day, it really sucks. But we can at least take solace in the fact that we did everything we could on our end, and that all we need to do like next week is just do the same things. And more often than not, the session will be better, right? As long as they're nailing all those variables, like more often than not, the session's better, and understanding and making them aware that like, yeah, man, like, I even have terrible days too. Like I've had terrible training cycles and I felt like I was nailing everything. Right. And, I can still have like a bad meet. It happens to the best of us. Not everyone's going to talk about it because it's not sexy. It's not fun to talk about, but just understanding that all you can control is your, controllables.
Yeah. You have visualization in here, like the mental side, goal setting, visualization, meditation, objectivity.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in that realm right now because I think realizing what you can control and what you cannot is huge when it comes to sport, the psychology of sport, and which is a weird subject because the way that most people see that is the arousal needed to lift a weight and then rest. And then everything else just doesn't get talked about because it's not important. Whereas if your life is a complete clusterfuck, then it's going to be all hard. You can become good at compartmentalizing, which is I believe it's necessary if you want to be good at anything. Just being able to put shit out of your brain, deal with it later, deal with the task that's there. That is powerlifting. Yeah. In a way where where does the visualization fall in for you and for the athletes you work with?
Sure. So for me, myself, a lot of it just kind of comes down to specific habits that I go through day to day in training. So like we just filmed a video before we got on the podcast talking about like your walkout, right? So with that, when I'm visualizing, if I'm trying to imagine how a weight's going to feel or look at the meet, I'll walk through it. I'll have my exact same setup that I do in the gym. So like I always set my right hand on the bar first. I set my left hand. I always swing my right foot back before I get underneath the bar. That's the first foot that goes underneath it. I basically am picturing exactly how I'm going to play on the day of the meet that I am in training. And part of that can be uncomfortable for people because sometimes you have to deal with the fact that like you're going to deal with this physiological sensations of like, okay, now my heart rate is starting to like escalate, right? Because you're now imagining you're under 700-pound squat, like in my case, or you're going for a PR, right? So visualizing exactly how it's going to feel at the meet, visualizing what it might look like when you're looking out at the crowd, and visualizing, what that might sound like. Some of these things are activities that like I try to do every once in a while. I admittedly was, I think, a little bit better when I was younger at doing this, but I think after like a certain amount of time, you kind of just get good at knowing what certain things are going to feel like. But for my lifters, it's having them have a specific setup, for every lift, right? Like making things habitual, making sure that their setup is the same for every lift, whether it's from, the bar all the way up to the heaviest set of the day or the heaviest lift of prep, right? And I can tell, like, for example, one of my lifters that I just handled at his meet a couple weeks ago, he started to do things that were like uncharacteristic of him on like his squat walkout, his squat setup. And, he even said, like, after he got out from underneath the bar, he's like, yeah, I don't know why I rushed my squat walkout. Like I've never done that. And, I think part of that, we didn't really discuss it at the time, but I think part of it just comes down to like, you need to have those mental reps in between your training sessions so that you can be ready for when the weight is incredibly heavy. Cause I mean, let's face it, you can't go to 100% all the time, hence why it's 100%. So you need ways to touch that weight mentally. And how do you do that? Through visualization. And so that's like one skill that I like to use or like kind of tell people do sometimes if they're having issues with confidence. Now, there's some people that already do that and we don't need to discuss it. Some other things that I think can be helpful, like we touched on or you mentioned, was like meditation. So I've been meditating since I've been in high school, even during those rough times. I think it's a really great way for people to understand that, number one, they aren't their thoughts, meaning that like I look at your thoughts as kind of like one of those it's like a viewfinder thing. Like when you have a kid, you put that stuff in front of your eyes, you can click the thing and it's just pictures are going by. I view your thoughts or like your mind as like the viewfinder, and like your thoughts are just these things that are kind of going through, and you don't always have 100% control of what's you're seeing. Like they just happen. I mean, everyone's probably had those moments where you might be driving your car, you might have your phone in your hand or whatever, and you're like, what if I just threw this out the window? It's like, well, why would you have that thought? It's just an intrusive thought, right? So learning to understand that, number one, you aren't necessarily your thoughts, things just kind of bubble up to the surface. Also learning to like be more present with your body, right? So like understanding what feelings you're having before a squat session when it's really like intimidating. You might start feeling like your heart's racing. You might start feeling like your palms are sweaty, like that Eminem song. But being cognizant of like these stress responses in your body or even in your mind, right? Like you might start noticing certain recurring thoughts that are happening over and over. Like every time I hit this weight, it's really hard. And it's like, you have to kind of question yourself, or this thought. It's like every time, is it hard every time? Like you've squatted more than this and like you've destroyed this weight before. So is it really every time? So just becoming more aware of the experience of being in your body and like what's going on in terms of not only like what's going on below the neck in terms of like your sensations, but what's going on above the neck in terms of like what your thoughts are. I think those are two things that are really helpful with like visualization and meditation, to understanding that this isn't just like a physical sport, even though it is probably more physical than others. There's not, like I said, a huge skill component, but there is a mental component that probably isn't discussed or touched on as much as it should be.
I just want to take a moment to let you know about our crew. What our crew is, it allows the show to stay independent, and it's the reason why the podcast is still here now. The podcast is free to listen to, but it's not free to produce. It keeps going because of the sales through elitefts, our show sponsors, but more importantly, our crew members. The reason I love this is for many reasons, is it keeps the show independent. So I can pick who I want to speak to. I can pick what topics I want to speak to, and I don't have to be accountable to anybody. I just go off what the crew members want and what the audience wants, and I don't have to deal with all the other bull crap that's associated with the podcast world. In return, what you get with the crew is ad-free episodes that are released a day ahead of time. You get access to our Discord community, which has AMAs, like 60 ebooks. We try to put a new ebook out every single month. Access to our coaching community with form checks, training Q&As. It also gives you invitations to our training retreats that are out here in the gym once or twice a year. 76% of all the people that joined in 2022 are still members now. Right now, you can either go month to month or get 2 months free with an annual plan. Just look for the link in the description, look at the QR code, or search elitefts.com crew and join today. It means a lot.
It's interesting. It's when I was a senior in high school, I went through, it was a flotation tank, sports psychology, basically learning, being brainwashed, but I learned a lot through that time because it was a sensory deprivation tank before they were in a thing, and the visualization and, visualizing every training session, and getting to a point to where, this went on for like a year, anchoring. I would be able to anchor colors, so if it was an aroused state that I wanted to be in, it would always start and end with red. And when you start, and I think that's where people get a little lost with the whole visualization thing, is they try to visualize and their thoughts are all over the place. Yeah. It's like the first thing they need to realize is they're already doing it. It's called daydreaming. Yeah. When they're driving to the gym, they're thinking about training. Right? As soon as they catch themselves thinking about training, instead of thinking about how awesome it's going to be, just change that thought into, this is what my walkout's going to look like. Yeah. This is what, the things that are more critical to the actual performance, is think of that instead of that top weight. Yeah. Then that will shift it. But once I was able, after this long period of time, I can just close my eyes and see red and boom, go, and then blue down, right? So I learned how to recover faster between sets, to bring the heart rate back down. All these kind of things are kind of vital. But today it's so much easier. And this is one of the things that I don't think people understand, is the walkout is critical. Your setup is critical on all lifts, right? If your setup is wrong, we all know it. You can watch somebody, if they're walking out, you already said it several times, you can see in their face if they're going to make or miss this lift. You just see it, right? Because something fucked up, in the walkout, something wasn't right. Something wasn't right throughout the whole thing. Well, they can control that. They have phones. Like, they have a video of them walking the weight out. Perfect. Yep. If they can't visualize, just watch, just look at it. Watch, and then try to look away and see. Imagine it, right? Because that's all it is. So easy now, right? Where I just like stare at pencils and fucking candles and get in this mental state to be able to at least allow the imaging to be able to come in. It's all right there, and if it's just a complete clusterfuck, find somebody who's built like you, same physical structure. Watch them over and over and over. I don't care what the weight is. I'm sure you don't either. Just, you want that solid setup, to be able to go from there, and then just build, because the repetitions matter. Yeah. Right. And you can either do that or stress about how that last squat felt like shit. And you see them, one's reinforcing, that negative trait, where the other one would be building on the positive trait. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kind of teaching people to focus on, again, things that they can control, and like giving them an action plan of like, this didn't go great, but this is what we can do next time, versus like focusing on the sensations of failure, right? Like, oh man, that was really tough. Oh my God, am I hit my end of block goal? Am I going to hit what I want it to meet? Like, oh my gosh, like, giving them actually like, okay, like this didn't go well. Like, let's focus on this for next week, and so on and so forth, and you'll be good to go. And it's still going to happen. Like, can't protect. Oh my God. The number of times I had a shitty training session and just fucked up my whole week was countless, but even during that time, I would catch myself. It's like, motherfucker, you're mad. It's like, why am I mad about it? Because I suck, keep going. And I think the trick is to learn how to catch yourself, to be able to pull yourself out, but to understand it's always going to happen. I think people are under this false illusion that they're never going to think bad, You know, it's like
Yeah.
if they're a top lifter, if you're John Hack, he never thinks that any of his sessions went bad. Well, I'll tell you what, he probably thinks most of them go bad.
Yeah.
You know, he always wants to go train. You guys don't want to train half the time you go into the fucking gym, if you're being honest.
No, it just becomes like something you do. It's a part of you. Yeah, I think it's finding the like delineation between helping lifters understand that there are things that make beginners and intermediates different from like elite level lifters, but it's probably not what they imagine. Like, you know, it's like the classic, like I still put my, you know, pants on one leg at a time like everyone else. You know, everyone still has bad training sessions. Everyone still has moments of doubt. Everyone still has, you know, the life stress or work stress, like we were saying. You know, that's not like unique to you or any other lifter. Like, I think the only difference maybe between the elite level lifters beyond just the genetics, and some of that might even be like mental genetics as well, which you could talk about, but like, you know, that is the fact that it's just, for the most part, like it's just experience and time. And like, they just understand that, you know, over the course of, we'll say 1,000 training sessions compared to a beginner's, I don't know, like 100, you know, more often than not, during those 1,000 training sessions, you're going to experience the entire gamut of what training is going to offer. So that means you're going to have training sessions where you get injured. That's going to mean training sessions where you hit a PR you did not expect. And I think as that experience mounts and it, you know, you get more and more and more of it, you just kind of become less surprised by these things, and you learn to kind of cope with the ebbs and flows of training versus like, you know, a beginner, like if they only have those 100 training sessions, you know, every single one is more meaningful. And not to say that, you know, they don't mean anything, but like, you know, every success is all the way up here versus every failure is all the way down here. And as time goes on with those elite lifters, like, you know, you don't really get those highs as much anymore. And neither really, hopefully not, the lows aren't too low, because it usually means like you blew something off the bone. But, you know, after a while, like it stops going like this, and it's just kind of like this steady thing, you know, right? So I think that's something to consider as well when you're like a beginner lifter, intermediate, whoever's listening to this is like, I don't want people to think that I'm trying to trivialize what they're experiencing. It's just, you just need more time. And what you're experiencing, if elite lifters aren't talking about it, that doesn't mean it's not happening. It's just, it's become so normal for them that it doesn't register. And so, over time, if you stick with it for long enough, whatever level you reach, it will probably become the same for you. And to just give yourself some grace when things may not be going, you know, to, you know, the utmost standard or like meeting expectations. Cause that's another thing is, you know, after like some people, it's like if they hit their expectations, they're not satisfied because it's expected. If they fail to meet them, like the lifter you were talking about, the woman wanting to hit the world record, they're like, I'm done. And they're only satisfied when they massively exceed them, right?
Yes, but that's fleeting.
That is very fleeting, and that's not going to happen every time, if ever, for, you know, some people.
Yeah, the only advice I would give for the lifters that have compressed it to where it's, you know, that shorter wave that you're talking about, is a lot of that's habit based, a lot of it's repetition based, a lot of it's, you know, being able to forget fast, you know. The only detriment that can happen through there, because I've been through this whole cycle and see all these other people go through the whole cycle, is they need to take time to pause and be grateful that they're in that wave.
Yeah.
Right. Because what you don't know is when that wave stops because you get injured, right? Then for a lot of people, it's like, okay, new challenge. I'm coming back from this as soon as I can. You know, it kind of plays into that whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's easy to take the whole process for granted because it's just so normalized that the meditation would play into that. But just to think, you know, to be grateful for it, because it won't always be there. This happens in relationships too. You know, if you have, you know, two people that are married, they end up taking each other for granted because it's so stable, it's so good, it's so nice, it's normalized, and they don't pause, take a moment to be able to, like, this is really fucking good. Like this, I should be grateful for this because who knows what the next day is going to bring. Right. And we know in lifting that next day for some people can be quad tendons blowing. It can be all this other kind of shit, where be grateful for when you're in those, that shorter ebb and flow, because it won't last long, right? And that's really what it's all about, is when you can get to a point, I call it do it anyways, you know, where you don't want to train, you just do it anyhow. You don't want to eat well, you just do it anyhow.
Yeah.
You just keep doing all these things just because you just do it. That's what you're going to remember when it's all over. You know, is that you're still going to remember the big fucking PR. So everybody that says, you know, all the doctors and all these other people that say, when you're on your fucking deathbed, you're not going to think about this. I'm like, oh, motherfucker, I've been close to my deathbed, and I thought about a couple of them.
Oh, of course. Yeah, because they kind of transcend in some ways the weight room. Like a lot of times, like a PR is cool because obviously it's a PR, but I mean, I'm sure you might agree with this. Like at some point, lifting becomes more than lifting. It becomes like an extension of your personality. It becomes a method of like self-mastery, right? So like those PRs are not only a PR because like you added 20 pounds to your best squat, which is awesome, but it's like I overcame a lot to get there, because it's not just like here's this weight and here's this weight that I did more. It's like here's this weight and then here's like, you know, a failed relationship. Here's like things that I missed out on, you know, in terms of like prioritizing perhaps lifting over certain things. Here's this like injury. Here's like this, you know, struggle with like mental health due to whatever reason. There's all these things that come with it. And like, you have to rise above, you know, all these, what's the word I'm looking for? Obstacles or like, you know, adversity in order to succeed. And so it's like, on one hand, they look at it as like, you did X plus 10, like, good for you. It's like, well, yeah, I did X plus 10 and that's great. But I also like grew massively as a person. And like, that's something that is really hard for some people to like grasp. So yeah, you're definitely going to think about, like, I agree with you. You're definitely going to think about those numbers on your death because, well, you know, because while we all do these to, you know, lift heavy shit, and sometimes it's like a dick swinging contest, a lot of it is, there's a massive amount of self-growth that happens in the sport. That
it's crazy. Sometimes the most impressive PRs are the 5-pound PRs.
Yeah.
You know, if you look through somebody's open powerlifting and you see, you know, that 5-pound total PR, but it happened 5 years later. There's a couple year gaps that are in here. There's all this other stuff. There's a lot of shit, right? Where the other voice may say, well, dude, it was only a 5-pound PR. It's like, it's all the shit that you just said, plus more, you know, to be able to make that happen, to where that chip, you know, it's not just a chip, man. It's
everything.
It's everything. You know, and to some people, it is literally everything, you know, to be able to do that. But it's also teaching skills that are going to be required in other areas. You know, as people move forward with your own coaching, what's one of the coolest 5-pound PRs that you've seen?
That's a good one.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment because we do read the comments, and one of them that keeps popping up more frequently than not is, I can't believe this video doesn't get more views. Take a minute to subscribe, leave a comment, and share. It really does help.
It was not a 5-pound PR, but it is one of my clients. Hopefully he's okay with me kind of putting this out there. But it was one of my clients. I went to handle him at this meet, and he had recently come back from like a long hiatus where he had a lot of like personal stuff happen. He was, you know, homeless for a while. He had issues with like drug addiction, like myself. And, you know, prior to that, he was powerlifting, and, you know, he had his certain total. And for him, you know, he comes back to powerlifting. You know, it's like this 5-year hiatus where he went through all this stuff, and he's kind of just getting back on the horse, so to speak. And being there, able to handle him at his meet where he hit, it was admittedly a pretty massive PR. Like, it was like a 500-pound PR, but like, the point still stands, is like being there, knowing what that meant. That was probably, it could have been a 5-pound PR, but it would have still felt like a 500-pound PR because of everything that, like you said, like went through it or went into it. Right. Cause it's like, again, it's, we put so much of, you know, our lives into lifting weights, some of us, right. For so many reasons. And so it can be like really, really hard when things don't come together. Speaking as someone that's had that happen, you know, it can be tough, but like when you get those 5-pound PRs, it's like, it's the most beautiful thing, right? Like, so being there, seeing him hit his PRs, you know, seeing his family there, right? Like, you know, seeing them like kind of like all rejoice and being so happy in the moment and like seeing what it meant for him was like really, really more important and like more impactful to me than I would have ever guessed being a coach. Like if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I'd been like, that's cool, but like it's not like, like whatever, but like now having been there for that moment and being there for some other moments too, like it's like I can't like, you can't like put a price tag on that because it's huge, right? Like being able to like help people like that and kind of help them become stronger, not only as lifters but individuals, and kind of help them transform or play some part in that I can't put it, it's hard to put into words. Yeah.
Would you say it's more gratifying than your own PR?
As I get older, yes. I think if you would have asked me that 10 years, I would have been like, I don't give a fuck. But I think that's probably because I was too immature. I didn't have the right mindset, or I couldn't, have enough perspective. But as I get older, I'd hopefully get more wisdom. Yes, I think it is definitely more than some of my own PRs. And admittedly, some of that is what I said earlier about, expectations. When you hit expectations, even if it's a 20-pound PR, sometimes you kind of become numb to it. But yeah, being able to be part of that was, especially recently, and that's kind of what's led me down the coaching route. Being able to be part of that has definitely been more impactful than my PRs, I would say, on the whole. Yeah.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
No, not that I can think of. I think we kind of went all over the place in a good way. So I don't.
What are you training for now?
So I'm training for the Surge Pro. It's a local meet to me because I'm from Southeast Wisconsin. Sergio Luna puts on this meet. He's a gym owner in Chicago. He's had this pro meet for 10 years now. This is the 10-year anniversary. That was actually where I hit my first 2,000 pound total, was at his meet. So I want to kind of come back and do something big if, all things lining up. I'm training for that. That is in October, locally by me in Chicago. So that's in about 6-ish months, maybe slightly 5 months or so. So I'm trying to get ready for that. Just coming off of I guess I could say like a comeback meet, because I had some injuries. So this past meet, if you look at my open powerlifting, not my best performance in my eyes, but I'm trying to just get back to where I was, get back to my best total at 198, try to surpass that and just continue on the journey forward.
What's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, the Sheriff Lifts. Not like my last name, because it's hard to spell. It's like Sheriff, the occupation, I think it's just the Sheriff Lifts, or it might be the _Sheriff _lifts on Instagram.
Where's the name come from?
My last name, Sharafinski. Yeah. So when I was in football, they couldn't, pronounce my name, but my mom was just like, just call him Sheriff. It's fine. They're like, all right, Sheriff. And, it's really hard to spell. It's really hard to
thank.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where it comes from. Funny enough, I actually have a cousin who's actually a sheriff, so I can only imagine what her life's like being called Sharafinski. So, yeah.
All right. We'll have all the links in the description. Thank you for coming out. This has been great.
This has been great.